Chapter 670. In the righteous martial arts world, the old celestial master was a legend. A living legend. As a result, this legend was defeated by Xiaofan. This matter was enough to set off waves in the martial arts world. And it wasn't over yet. After going to Dragon Tiger Mountain to challenge the old celestial master, Xiaofan even went to the southern wilderness and challenged the abbot of Subhuti Zen Monastery, Monk Rama. He also defeated him, forcing the Subhuti Zen Monastery to stay in the southern wilderness for a year. After 2 battles, the world was shocked. Xiaofan was also ranked 5th on the legendary list, becoming the top demonic cultivator in the martial arts world. After the Battle of Guangzhong City, Chu Xiu indeed won, but the major sects retreated so cleanly, which was also because of Xiaofan. And no one came to trouble Chu Xiu, which was also Xiaofan's credit. Chu Xiu's talent and strength were indeed amazing, and the momentum he made this time was not small, but compared with Xiaofan, it was completely insignificant. This time when Chu Xiu stepped into the realm of Martial Dao Grandmaster, he naturally automatically left the Longhu list, but because of his performance in this battle, Wind Sweeping Tower also ranked Chu Xiu in the martial arts ranking list. He was ranked 35th, just behind Zhang Qingjin. In fact, even the current Wind Sweeping Tower couldn't tell who was stronger between Chu Xiu and Zhang Qingjin. Chu Xiu challenged 4 Grandmasters and Shen Bai, who was not weaker than the Grandmaster. But although Zhang Qingjin's opponents who stepped into the real pellet state were only 5 who were in the realm of unity of man and nature, each of them was not weaker than the Martial Dao Grandmaster. Zhang Qingjin's Thunder Golden Elixir had not been condensed for thousands of years, and only Dugu Weiwei had successfully condensed Chu Xiu's Immortal Demon Pill. The two didn't fight, so no one could tell who was stronger or weaker. Therefore, the ranking of the Wind Sweeping Building was only ranked according to the order. Zhang Qingjin stepped into the real pellet state first, so he was ranked ahead of Chu Xiu. Of course, this ranking didn't mean much to Chu Xiu because now all the people in the pugilistic world were focusing on Xiaofan. As for Chu Xiu himself, he was also happy to keep a low profile. After all, for the current Chu Xiu, he had just stepped into the real pellet state of martial Dao. What he needed was time. After the war, the entire Guangzhong torture room was completely loyal. Those who wanted to run had run away, and those who didn't had their status in Guangzhong torture room promoted by 1 level. Chu Xiu handed these things over to Ghost Hand King for the time being. He had just stepped into the real pellet state, so he needed to temporarily retreat to stabilize the restless real pellet state. After everything was arranged, Wuxia looked at Chu Xiu and shook his head. Your behavior this time is simply gambling with your life. Only the master has successfully condensed the Immortal Demon Pill. No one can be 100% sure whether it is really immortal or not. Chu Xiu said solemnly, at that time, apart from gambling with my life, I can only wait for death. I don't want to wait for death, so I can only take the risk. Fortunately, God still cares for me. Wuxia shook his head. Maybe he was old. He might have done something as dangerous as Chu Xiu when he was young, but now, he wouldn't do it again. At this time, Wuxia suddenly thought of something. He wondered, why did Divine Lord Luo escape in the end? Could it be that he saw you perform the red dust ethereal slash and thought that Patriarch Dugu is still alive? Chu Xiu hesitated for a moment, then said, it's possible. After all, Senior Wei, you once said that Patriarch Dugu fought his way to the heavenly gates and almost destroyed the entire heavenly gates by himself. Therefore, it's possible that the people of the heavenly gates are afraid of Senior Dugu. Chu Xiu didn't plan to tell Wuxia about his abnormal behavior. It seemed to be related to his deepest secret. Not to mention Wuxia, Chu Xiu didn't plan to tell anyone else. Wuxia nodded hesitantly. However, it was obvious that he didn't believe Chu Xiu. Patriarch Dugu was indeed famous, but it wasn't so famous that he could scare people away after seeing one of his moves. However, in that battle, only he and Chu Xiu knew what Divine Lord Luo saw. In the eyes of Wuxia and others, Chu Xiu just made one move, and Divine Lord Luo was inexplicably scared away. Wuxia didn't bother much. He just said to Chu Xiu, you just stepped into the real pellet state, so you need to cultivate behind closed doors for a while. I won't bother you anymore. By the way, Luo Sansong, Zhao Chengping and others will stay under your command. There is no future for them to follow an old man like me. Luo Sansong, Zhao Chengping and other martial artists of the Yinma clan were not weak. In the past, when they followed Wuxia, They could only hide in the dark most of the time. Now that the Inma clan could regain its foothold in the underworld, at least the people under Chu Xiu could walk openly in Guanzhong. This was already a great improvement. After explaining all this, Chu Xiu went directly into retreat. As he just stepped into the real pellet state, he must let the real pellet of martial arts completely stabilize. If he made a move rashly, although it wouldn't break the real pellet, it was still not good. After a month of retreat, Chu Xiu had already stabilized the restless real pellet in his body. On the path of martial arts, the real pellet state was a threshold. Once you crossed it, it would be another world. Now Chu Xiu finally had such a feeling. When he was in the unity of man and nature state, Chu Xiu's explosive power was equally amazing, but at that time, Chu Xiu only relied on his own strength and powerful martial arts to display this power. But when he reached the real pellet state, with the existence of the real pellet state in his body, Chu Xiu seemed to have some kind of connection with this world. He could control this world with a wave of his hand. Of course, it was still a bit exaggerated to say that he could completely control it, but at least within the scope of Chu Xiu's control, Chu Xiu could use the power of this world. Stretching out his hand, Chu Xiu gently drew a line in front of his eyes, and a sliver of vital energy flowed out. However, it was this sliver of vital energy that attracted the power of the world's vital energy, turning it into a sharp blade qi that slashed at the wall, leaving behind a deep mark. One was to passively borrow the power of this world, and the other was to completely control it. This was also the most straightforward gap between the real pellet state and the unity of man and nature state. Stepping into the real pellet state should have been a joyous event, but Chu Xiu didn't have too much excitement. Instead, his heart was shrouded in a haze. The abnormalities that occurred when he stepped into the real pellet state and the performance of Divine Lord Luo could prove that some strange changes had occurred in him. It was just that Chu Xiu still had no clue about this matter. The only thing he was sure of was that he and Dugu Weiwei seemed to have a strange connection. He seemed to be living in the shadow of the other party. This feeling was very bad. After moving around for a while, Chu Xiu pushed open the door of the retreat room and asked the Ghost Hand King about the movements in the Guanzhong torture room during this time. The Ghost Hand King sneered and said, "Since the last war, the land of Guanzhong has become more prosperous than before, and the number of merchants has even increased by several times. Most of the martial artists in the Guanzhong torture room are also convinced. Although these guys say that they want to be loyal to the Guanzhong torture room, in fact, for them, as long as there are benefits and the protection of the powerhouse, then everything is fine. Even those who chose to escape before wanted to come back, but I rejected them all. They are just idiots. They are useless." Chu Xiu nodded. What the Ghost Hand King did was right. Before the war began, some people chose to escape, and some people chose to stay in the Guanzhong torture room. Regardless of whether the disciples who chose to stay in the Guanzhong torture room chose to stay because of their loyalty to Chu Xiu, since they made the right choice, they should be rewarded. If those who made mistakes were allowed to come back, it would be really unfair to the martial artists who chose to stay in the Guanzhong torture room. By the way, you just said that there are more merchants going to the land of Guanzhong. What is going on? The Ghost Hand King said, "Isn't it because of Sir's reputation? Those merchants coming and going to the land of Guanzhong don't care if you are righteous or demonic. As long as you can bring them benefits, it is enough." Previously, when Guan Siyu was around, she strictly investigated the smuggling of contraband between the three countries. Although there were some who slipped through the net due to the unwritten rules, they could not do it openly. Now that you are in charge of the Guanzhong torture room, there are naturally not so many rules. You just need to collect some tolls in exchange for such a convenient and fast trade route. Moreover, with your strength, you can cover the Guanzhong torture room. Of course they will not refuse. Chu Xiu nodded indifferently. At his current realm, he no longer cared about small profits. Almost all the profits from the Guanzhong torture room were distributed to the martial artists under him in the Guanzhong torture room. This was very normal for some large sections. They monopolized some of the profits and business. In fact, the experts in their sects might not need these things, but their disciples still needed them. After giving some instructions to the Ghost Hand King, Chu Xiu went straight to Wei Shuya's room. During this time, Wei Shuya did not leave. He was guarding for Chu Xiu. After all, he couldn't make a move casually when he was in the real pellet state. Otherwise, it would affect his future martial Dao cultivation. "Thank you, Senior Wei." Chu Xiu cupped his fist and said in a deep voice. Wei Shuya waved his hand casually and said, "There's nothing to thank me for. You worked hard. I'm just adding flowers to the brocade. By the way, Senior Wei, after this incident, did my Yinma lineage take any action? Is there any change in the underworld? Chu Xiu asked. Wei Shuya shook his head with a wry smile. This time, it should have been my Yinma lineage to be the protagonist, but the limelight was completely stolen by the moon-worshipping cult. Yi Xiaonan's status as the top demonic cultivator has been established. The moon-worshipping cult dominates West Chu, and they even openly recruit disciples in the Central Plains. Their attitude is extremely aggressive. All the major sects are now wary of the moon-worshipping cult, but they have no time to care about us. Speaking of which, this time Yi Xiaonan helped us a lot and helped us share a lot of pressure. When Wei Shuya said this, he was a little bitter. He didn't know if he should be happy or depressed. Chapter 671. The hidden demon lineage and the bright demon lineage had been fighting for so long. In fact, the entire hidden demon lineage had always thought that they were not much worse than the other party. Even most people in the hidden demon lineage looked down on the bright demon lineage, thinking that they were all cowards, and they were the orthodox of the Kunlun devil cult. As a result, Yi Xiaonan had become the top demonic cultivator, and the moon-worshipping cult also took the attention of the righteous martial arts world for the hidden demon lineage. This made Wei Shuya's mood very complicated. After chatting with Wei Shuya for a while, the Ghost Hand King suddenly knocked on the door and came in. "Sir, someone is looking for you." Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "Who is looking for me? Is it Brother Lu and the others?" During the month when Chu Xiu was in retreat, Lu Fengxian and the others either returned to their respective sects or stayed in the Guanzhong torture room to practice for a while. For example, Lu Fengxian and Luo Fei Heng were like this. They also fought with the martial Dao Grandmaster in this battle, and they all had some gains, so they were going to retreat in the Guanzhong torture room for a while before leaving. The Ghost Hand King shook his head and said, "No, young Master Lu and the others are still in retreat. They are people from the Northern Yan Imperial Court." Chu Xiu nodded in understanding. He remembered that he seemed to have an agreement with the Northern Yan Imperial Court. Of course, Chu Xiu did not intend to go back on this matter. Since Xiang Long helped him at the critical moment, Chu Xiu naturally had to keep his word. Besides, during the Northern Yan Alliance, although Nie Rinlong died in the hands of Chu Xiu did not intend to let go of the hatred of others so easily. Moreover, Chu Xiu did plan to go to the Northern Yan. Guanzhong was too small. The resources could support a few martial Dao Grandmasters, but it was difficult for Chu Xiu to go further. Now that Chu Xiu had just stepped into the real pellet state, he didn't need to be so anxious. However, something happened when he attacked Luo Shenjun, which made Chu Xiu suddenly feel a sense of crisis in his heart. This feeling of not being in his control was very uncomfortable, so what Chu Xiu could do was to improve his strength as fast as possible. For this, he would do anything. Wei Shuya, who was at the side, said in a deep voice, "I do not object to your cooperation with Xiang Long. The Jianghu's court may sound simple, but it has never been truly separated. However, Xiang Long is a great ruler of his generation. He is a man of deep thought and is harsh and merciless. If you work with him, you must be careful. Although this person had some problems, he had a lot. He was a master. Yang Long is master. Xiang Long is a master. Yang Long Dragon Xiang." In the past, when Xiang Long united with the Northern Yan pugilistic world to attack the Eastern Qi, it was Yang Gongdu who helped Xiang Long. He lobbied and schemed in the Northern Yan pugilistic world and finally succeeded in this matter. He alone should take at least half of the credit for this matter. As you can see, Yang Gongdu was forced out of the Northern Yan pugilistic world just because he intervened in the battle for the throne. Even Xiang Long had the intention to kill him. It was only because Yang Gongdu still had some trump cards that he survived. This is a lesson from the past. Accompanying the king is like accompanying a tiger. If you touch Xiang Long's reverse scale, with his character, I'm afraid he won't care about the Yinma clan. For most people in the pugilistic world, most of them had no impression of the imperial court. After all, most of the time, they would not and did not want to deal with the imperial court. But the existence of status and strength like Wei Shuya was very clear about the power of the imperial court. Apart from the always weak West Chu, whether it was the Eastern Qi world or the Northern Yan world, the power of the imperial court was not something that a single sect or faction could shake. Chu Xiu nodded and said, "Thank you for the advice, Senior Wei." Wei Shuya waved his hand and did not say anything else. In his opinion, Chu Xiu was a smart person. Although sometimes Chu Xiu's actions were a little too radical and risky, this was his way of doing things. Chu Xiu still had a sense of propriety. The recent events had proved all of this. After bidding farewell, Chu Xiu went straight to the meeting hall. At this moment, a middle-aged martial art practitioner dressed in a black official robe was holding a teacup and playing with it, as if he was studying the patterns on it. There was still hot tea in the teacup, but under the cover of his inner strength, no matter how he played with it, not a single drop of tea flowed out. This person was the Marquis of Linping, Xiang Wu, who had been sent by Xiang Long to intercept forefather Huang Fu. He was the most talented member of the Xiang royal family. Seeing Chu Xiu come in, Xiang Wu immediately put down his teacup and sized up Chu Xiu without the slightest scruple, as if he was looking at something strange. Chu Xiu did not say anything. He only looked at Xiang Wu and said indifferently, "Marquis, why are you looking at me like that? Is there something on my face?" Xiang Wu shook his head and said, "You are much rarer than flowers. To be honest, I really did not expect you to survive this. It seems that His Majesty is far-sighted and did not make a losing deal." After saying this, Xiang Wu's expression suddenly turned solemn. He said, "Chu Xiu, it is time to fulfill the promise you made to His Majesty. His Majesty asked me to remind you in case you forget." Chu Xiu said with a smile that was not a smile, "If I really forget, what does His Majesty plan to do?" Xiang Wu laughed and said, "What do you think His Majesty sent me here for? If you really forget, then His Majesty will let me use my own method to remind you." Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "Don't worry, Chu Xiu, am very particular about keeping my word. I will not forget what I promised. This time, I will bring people with me to Northern Yen with the Marquis. Of course, you must give me some time to make arrangements for the Guanzhong torture room." Xiang Wu waved his hand casually and said, "It is good that you can remember. There is no need to be in such a hurry. His Majesty did not set a date for you. It just so happens that I can stay in the Guanzhong torture room for one night and try the local specialties of Guanzhong." Xiang Wu's hobbies were very strange. When others reached his position and realm, they were greedy for things like power and influence. But Xiang Wu's biggest hobby was eating. And his talent in martial arts was extremely shocking. This also made people feel that the heavens were somewhat unfair. After sending Xiang Wu away, Chu Xiu called the Ghost Hand King and gave him some instructions. In fact, there was nothing much to explain. Now that the Guanzhong torture room had been stabilized, the most important thing was that Wei Shuya was temporarily recovering here. With an expert in the true fire spirit refinement realm in charge, Chu Xiu could feel much more at ease. So the next day, Chu Xiu brought people with him to Northern Yen with Xiang Wu. This time, Chu Xiu did not bring too many people. He only brought Tang Ya and other elites from the Blue Dragon Society, and some of his trusted subordinates from Guanxi. They were all the stronger ones. There were also Luo Sansong, Zhao Chengping, and other warriors from the Yinma clan. Chu Xiu also brought them. These people were stronger, but they were a little unruly. They were not as useful as Tang Ya and the others. And this time, Mei Qinglian also took the initiative to come, which made Chu Xiu feel very strange. Feeling Chu Xiu's strange gaze, Mei Qinglian just said lightly, "After so many years, I have long been tired of staying in the Guanzhong torture room. Now I can find a chance to go out and get some fresh air. It is not a bad idea. Besides, I am helping you. Don't forget that you have a lot of enemies in the Northern Yen. Aren't you afraid that someone will secretly plot against you?" Chu Xiu smiled. His lips curled into a cold smile as he said, "They should be the ones who should be afraid." Before Mei Qinglian said anything, Xiang Wu, who was walking quietly beside them, suddenly came over and said, "You are very confident, but the Northern Yen martial arts world is not so easy to deal with. Those who participated in the alliance to kill you were only a part of it." Chu Xiu looked at him and said, "Your Majesty, you are anxious." Xiang Wu was stunned and said, "What did you say?" Chu Xiu said lightly, "Compared to me, the one who should be anxious should be Your Majesty. The Northern Yen Martial Arts World Alliance wants to kill me, and in just a few days, they have gathered so many people. The Great Light Temple sent someone here and said a word, and it is more effective than Your Majesty. If I were Your Majesty, I would also be anxious. Otherwise, with Your Majesty's character, you would not have specially sent you to find me. It is clear that for Your Majesty, any power is very important." Xiang Wu was stunned, then laughed and said, Sometimes it is not good to be too clear. It is fine for you to say this in front of me. I do not like to snitch, but if you say it in front of your majesty, you will be in trouble. As he said this, Xiang Wu stuffed a banana to Chu Xiao and said, "Eat more bananas and talk less." After saying this, Xiang Wu directly rode to the other side, no longer talking to Chu Xiao. Mei Qinglian raised her eyebrows and said, "Marquis Lin Ping Xiang Wu is very famous in the Northern Yan court. Who is this guy? Which side is he on?" Chu Xiao said indifferently, "He does not stand on either side. He only stands on his own side. This is what a smart person should be like. Although he looks preposterous and muddle-headed, he understands better than anyone else." Regardless of whether it is in the imperial court or in the pugilistic world, Xiang Wu will be able to do well. Mei Qinglian looked slightly surprised at Chu Xiao. She knew that Chu Xiao was a bit arrogant. It was not easy for Xiang Wu to be evaluated by Chu Xiao like this. After arriving at the capital of the Northern Yan, this time, Chu Xiao did not enter through the small door. Instead, he was led by Xiang Wu through the main door. Only Mei Qinglian was qualified to enter with Chu Xiao. The others were arranged outside. It was still in the side hall where Chu Xiao had met Xiang Long previously. However, this time, other than Xiang Long, there was an old man dressed in an evil Taoist robe standing by his side as well. "Greetings, Your Majesty." Chu Xiao and Mei Qinglian only cupped their hands for show. Xiang Long waved his hand and said, "Chu Xiao, you are finally here. You did not disappoint me this time. You survived this time, which means that my previous choice was not wrong. I helped you in the past, and now it is time for you to help me. I will not waste any more words. This is the Imperial Preceptor of the Northern Yan and my trusted confidant, the sect master of the Yinshan sect, Taoist Wu Wang. I intend to leave the matter of the Northern Yan martial world to the two of you." Chu Xiao did not say anything, but when Mei Qinglian, who was standing behind him, heard the words Shadow Mountain sect, her gaze towards Taoist Wu Yang was filled with a hint of surprise. Chapter 672. Xiang Long was very direct. It seemed that he had reached the limit of his tolerance for some of the Northern Yan martial world's actions. Chu Xiao glanced at Taoist Wu Yang. He didn't feel anything wrong. Xiang Long couldn't trust Chu Xiao completely on such a big matter. The Northern Yan court would definitely find someone to keep him in check. Since Taoist Wu Yang was Xiang Long's confidant, it was normal for him to be in charge of these things. Therefore, Chu Xiao just said in a low voice, "Your Majesty, rest assured. Since I made a promise in the past, I will definitely fulfill it. However, I still want to ask Your Majesty, since Your Majesty is going to let me suppress the martial arts of Northern Yan Kingdom, I wonder what kind of identity and power Your Majesty can give me? Otherwise, even the cleverest housewife can't cook without rice." Xiang Long said in a low voice, "I have already thought about this. I plan to set up a new department in the Northern Yan, called the Martial Suppression Hall. You, Chu Xiao, will be the governor, in charge of external expeditions. Taoist Wu Yang will be the chief supervisor, in charge of internal trials and recruiting rogue cultivators who are willing to work for the Northern Yan. In terms of rank, one will deal with internal affairs, while the other will deal with external affairs. Your authority is different, but your rank is the same. You are on the same level as the generals of the 5 armies. As for other aspects, I will not give you anything in terms of direct power. If I had more power, I wouldn't need to look for you. I could just send an army to suppress them. So I can only promise you that the Northern Yan court will do its best to cooperate with your actions in the Northern Yan martial world. However, if you make a big deal out of it, you will have to bear the consequences. But don't worry, I am not a petty person. After successfully suppressing the Northern Yan martial world, your Yinshan sect will become the national religion of the Northern Yan. It can be worshipped for generations. Chu Xiao, your Yinma clan can also establish their own sect in the Northern Yan land. No one will be blind enough to come and kill them." The generals of the Northern Yan 5 armies were basically at the same level as Xiang Wu. In terms of status, they were not low. Of course, status was just status, and power was power. Not only did Xiang Wu command the 5 armies of the kingdom, but he also had a lot of say in the Northern Yan imperial court. As for Chu Xiao and Taoist Wu Yang, they were both from the Jianghu. No matter how much Xiang Long trusted them, they were still outsiders. Therefore, other than their own subordinates, the other subordinates of the Northern Yan dynasty would not listen to their orders. As for Xianglong's promise, Chu Xiu did not take it to heart. Wei Shuya had once commented on Xianglong. This great ruler of the three kingdoms was actually a harsh and merciless person. His words should be taken with a grain of salt and not taken seriously. Taoist Wuyang bowed towards Xianglong and said, "Thank you, Your Majesty." Chu Xiu also cupped his hands and said, "Rest assured, Your Majesty. The promise I made to Your Majesty in the past will not change." Xianglong waved his hand and said, "Since this is the case, I will leave this matter to you. The matters of the Jianghu will naturally be settled by the people of the Jianghu. I will not ask too much. Remember, I only want results. I have already built the headquarters of the Zhenwu Hall. It is in Yanjing City. You can open the headquarters at any time. As for the specifics, you can discuss it among yourselves. Both of you are smart people. I believe you should know how to cooperate." After he finished speaking, Xianglong left the side hall with the help of an old eunuch. Taoist Wuyang walked over and cupped his hands at Chu Xiu. A strange smile appeared on his face and he said, "From now on, I will be working with Official Chu. I hope that Official Chu will give me some pointers." Chu Xiu said lightly, "That's easy. I wonder if Taoist Wuyang has any suggestions for the opening of the headquarters?" Taoist Wuyang said, "Official Chu has just arrived in the capital. Why don't you settle down for a night? Such an important matter naturally needs to be explained in detail. Tomorrow, we will go to the Zhenwu Hall to discuss in detail. What do you think, Official Chu?" "All right." Chu Xiu nodded. After Taoist Wuyang left, Chu Xiu also left the palace with Mei Qinglian. "You know that Taoist Wuyang?" After leaving the range of the palace, Chu Xiu suddenly asked. He could feel that Mei Qinglian's emotions seemed to be a little off after hearing the words Taoist Wuyang. Mei Qinglian shook her head and said, "I don't know this guy, but I have heard of the Shadow Mountain sect. They were once part of my Yinma sect. To be precise, they were part of my sacred cult in the past." Chu Xiu said in surprise, "They are also part of the orthodox Kunlun devil cult?" Mei Qinglian said, "They can't be considered orthodox. The Shadow Mountain sect has its own inheritance. Actually, at the beginning, the Shadow Mountain sect belonged to the Dao sect. However, they were good at all kinds of evil spells and ghost refining techniques. The Dao sect advocated nature, while the Shadow Mountain sect's philosophy was that life and death were the main path. Therefore, the disciples of the Shadow Mountain sect either studied how to live long or studied the dead, which was why they were rejected by the Dao sect. At that time, the power of the Holy Church was at its peak, and it dominated the Jianghu. Since the Shadow Mountain sect was rejected by the orthodox martial world and the Dao sect, it naturally joined the Holy Church. However, the Shadow Mountain sect seemed to have done something that made Patriarch Dugu very angry, so they were expelled from the sacred cult. However, the Shadow Mountain sect's leader was quite capable. He was actually able to take a blow from Patriarch Dugu and not die. Otherwise, the Shadow Mountain sect would not have been expelled, but directly annihilated. The Shadow Mountain sect offended both the orthodox and demonic sects, and from then on, disappeared from the martial world. You know what happened after that? The Shadow Mountain sect did not appear in the war between the orthodox and demonic sections. They did not appear for hundreds of years, so I thought that they were completely extinct. I didn't expect that they still had a successor. Chu Xiu rubbed his chin and said, "If that's the case, doesn't that mean that they are our enemies?" Mei Qinglian spread her hands and said, "It's a grudge from hundreds of years ago. Now, there aren't many people in the Yinma clan who remember the Shadow Mountain sect. We can't even be considered enemies. Let's see how the people of the Shadow Mountain sect see us." However, the Shadow Mountain sect's actions are treacherous. It's never wrong to be careful. Chu Xiu nodded and remembered this matter. However, he was not too worried about the Shadow Mountain sect and this Taoist Wuyang. To be a little arrogant, he, Chu Xiu, had even blocked the attacks of many orthodox sects, not to mention an evil sect that did not dare to appear for hundreds of years. The next morning, Chu Xiu, Mei Qinglian, and the others came to Yanjing City. Xianglong specially built the Zhenwu Hall for them. Chu Xiu had been to the two new and old capital cities of Eastern Qi, Great Liang City and Nanliang City. They were both very majestic. Although Chu Xiu had been to Yanjing City before, he did not take a good look. The last time he came to Yanjing City, Chu Xiu was to ask for help from the Northern Yan court. What he lacked the most was time. It was a race against time. How could he have the time to go sightseeing? This time, Chu Xiao had the time to look around. However, he was slightly disappointed. Northern Yan's background was not as good as Eastern Qi. Yanjing City was built in a square shape and very orderly. However, whether it was the area or the atmosphere in the city, it was not as grand as Eastern Qi's Great Liang City. It was also not as prosperous as Nanliang City. Tang Ya, who was standing behind Chu Xiao, smiled and said, "Sir, are you disappointed in Yanjing City? When you go to West Chu's capital, Jiangyu City, I think you will be even more disappointed. That place is not as prosperous as an ordinary big city in Eastern Qi." Chu Xiao asked, "Have you stayed in West Chu for a long time?" Tang Ya's eyes had a trace of reminiscence. He nodded and said, "Not too much. However, I am from Sichuan. I have been to Jiangyu City quite a bit. However, that was a long time ago." Everyone chatted along the way and arrived at the Zhenwu Hall. It seemed that Xiang Long had endured the Northern Yan's martial arts forces for a long time. The name Zhenwu Hall was enough to explain everything. Zhenwu Hall suppressed the Northern Yan martial arts world. The entire Zhenwu Hall was also extremely grand. It was built with black walls and red tiles, giving people a gloomy and ferocious feeling. The stone lions placed at the entrance of the Zhenwu Hall were not ordinary stone lions. Instead, they were two black tigers carved with incomparable intelligence. They looked abnormally ferocious. Walking into the Zhenwu Hall, Taoist Wuyang was already waiting there. Taoist Wuyang's subordinates were all pale and gloomy Taoist priests. It was unknown whether it was because of their cultivation methods, but this group of people seemed to have not seen the sun for a long time. The death aura on their bodies was very strong. When Taoist Wuyang saw Chu Xiao coming, the corner of his mouth twitched. He revealed a strange smile and said, "Official Chu is here? Then let's discuss the opening time of the Zhenwu Hall." Chu Xiao sat opposite Taoist Wuyang. He waved his hand and said, "Of course, the sooner the better. But before the opening, send invitations to all the Northern Yan martial arts sects and invite them to come and watch the ceremony." Taoist Wuyang frowned and said, "Why invite them? Do you want us to tell them that the Zhenwu Hall was established to deal with you?" Chu Xiao said indifferently, "Of course it is to establish our prestige. Whether they come or not is their business. Whether we invite them or not is our business." Taoist Wuyang said in a hoarse voice, "Official Chu, His Majesty asked us to establish the Zhenwu Hall in preparation to suppress the Northern Yan martial arts world. It is not for you to show off your power. If things go wrong, who will be responsible?" Chu Xiao narrowed his eyes and said, "Show off my power? Taoist, are you questioning my ability? From the Yinma lineage to the entire Guanzhong torture room, when have I, Chu Xiao, done anything wrong? On the contrary, Taoist, do you have any achievements in the martial arts world?" Chu Xiao's battle achievements were displayed on the excellence list. Countless people had died at Chu Xiao's hands through plots and schemes, open and covert struggles. He was indeed qualified to say such words. On the contrary, although Taoist Wuyang had the title of National Master, and his strength should not be considered weak in the real pellet state, he was really not as famous as Chu Xiao. At this moment, a middle-aged Taoist behind Taoist Wuyang said sarcastically, "Everyone knows how to boast. If things go wrong, our Yin Mountain sect will also have to bear the responsibility." As soon as his voice fell, Chu Xiao's eyes showed a touch of coldness, and his fingers slammed on the table. Right at this moment, Tang Ya, who was standing behind Chu Xiao, suddenly made his move. A transparent and slender flying dagger had left his hand at some point, and in almost an instant, it had already arrived in front of the middle-aged Taoist. Chapter 673. Among the warriors under Chu Xiao was most optimistic about two people. One was Tang Ya, and the other was Yan Bugui. Although they weren't the strongest, they had the greatest potential. At this time, Tang Ya was still in the half-step unity of heaven and man realm, but the middle-aged Taoist who spoke previously had already stepped into the unity of heaven and man realm. However, when Tang Ya's saber was almost in front of him, he suddenly reacted. His body twisted like a snake, and the gray deathly aura condensed into the shape of an evil spirit in front of him. However, it was instantly torn apart by the sharp aura of the saber. Relying on the deathly aura, the middle-aged Taoist managed to block the attack for a short moment. The middle-aged Taoist's body was almost twisted into the shape of a fried dough twist. Only then did he barely manage to dodge Tang Ye's attack. However, when he touched his face, he realized that his face had been torn by the sharp blade aura, and there was a bloody scar. Chu Xiu looked at Tang Ye in surprise. He did not expect that Tang Ye had actually reached this step. Tang Ye seemed to know a lot of things, such as qinggong, close combat, sword techniques, saber techniques, etc., but he was most proficient in concealed weapons. In the past, Tang Ye had asked Chu Xiu for some advice on concealed weapons, and he also wanted to learn Li Feiyan's way of cause and effect. At that time, Chu Xiu only gave Tang Ye some advice, telling him that the way of cause and effect was not taught, and also his future direction of martial arts. However, Chu Xiu did not expect Tang Ye to improve so quickly. In just a few months, Tang Ye had turned the simple into the complicated, and turned the dense and complicated concealed weapons into the saber with extreme speed and power. Taoist Wuyang slammed the table and shouted angrily, "Chu Xiu! What is the meaning of this? Does the Zhenwu Hall still have any rules?" Chu Xiu knocked the table and said coldly, "If the Zhenwu Hall has rules, why did your disciple interrupt just now? Does he have the right to interrupt when you and I are talking?" Previously in the royal palace, both Taoist Wuyang and Chu Xiu were restraining themselves. Both sides could still pretend to be polite. Now that the conflict had erupted, neither side would give the other any face. Chu Xiu said coldly, "Taoist Wuyang, I know who you are. If your Yin Mountain sect wants to find trouble with my hidden devil sect, then fine, I'll take it. If you only want to obtain the status of the orthodoxy, then I advise you to obediently cooperate with me. If the Zhenwu Hall develops well, it will be beneficial for both of us. If it doesn't, I'll just go back to Guangzhong and mess around. As for your Shade Mountain sect, you won't even have a place to stand. The state religion of Eastern Qi is the Zhenwu sect. You should know what kind of impression the Yin Mountain sect has in the eyes of the orthodox Taoist warriors. As for West Chu's moon-worshipping religion, you can try and see if moon-worshipping religion can accept you. His Majesty has already said, you and I, one inside and one outside. You do your thing, I do mine, and we won't interfere with each other. If you insist on interfering with my affairs, I'd like to see who will be the unlucky one in the end." Chu Xiu could roughly guess why the Yin Mountain sect had turned to the Northern Yan imperial court. It was nothing more than a place to stand. The Hidden Devil sect did not need such a place. Chu Xiu already had the Guangzhong torture room, so he did not need it either. If they really fell out, he would like to see who would lose more. Taoist Wuyang looked at Chu Xiu with a hint of coldness, but then he snorted coldly and said, "Fine. We'll do as you say. You deal with the outside and I'll deal with the inside. If your people cross the line, then don't blame me for being impolite." After saying that, Taoist Wuyang turned around and left. He did not argue with Chu Xiu about the opening date. After walking out of the main hall, the middle-aged Taoist who was almost severely injured by Tang Ye's blade just now said indignantly, "Master, that Chu Xiu is too arrogant and egotistical in the way he does things. We have been laying out our plans in Northern Yan for such a long time, but the moment he comes, he puts on an attitude of wanting to be the master of the house. Why?" Before he could finish, Taoist Wuyang had already slapped him across the face. "Who allowed you to speak without permission just now?" Taoist Wuyang looked coldly at the disciple. The middle-aged Taoist covered his face and explained, "Master, I saw that Chu Xiu." "Pa!" Another slap came. "Let me ask you who allowed you to speak just now?" This time, the middle-aged man did not dare to speak anymore. He only covered his face and lowered his head. Taoist Wuyang said coldly, "How many times have I warned you? Since you've joined the imperial court, then you have to do things according to the rules of the imperial court. I originally wanted to deal with Chu Xiu, but with your interruption, both sides shed all pretenses of cordiality. What's there to talk about then? When will you all stop being so rash?" The middle-aged Taoist covered his face and gritted his teeth. "Master, I know I was wrong. But this time, His Majesty is too unfair. My Shadow Mountain sect has sought refuge with His Majesty for many years. How many things have we done for His Majesty? In the end, although His Majesty has agreed to establish the Zhenwu Hall and confer Shadow Mountain sect as the national religion, he still brought Chu Xiu here. This clearly shows that he doesn't trust us." Taoist Wuyang said coldly, "Trust? If His Majesty could trust me so easily, he wouldn't be a hero of Northern Yan. The Zhenwu Hall is such an important position. If he only let me manage it, even if my Shadow Mountain sect has no other intentions, there will still be problems. Chu Xiu has appeared at the right time. Even if there isn't Chu Xiu, there will be others. Chu Xiu thought that Xiang Long had sent Taoist Wuyang to keep him in check. Now, Taoist Wuyang thought that Xiang Long had done this to keep him in check. Xiang Long's political tactics were incomparably experienced. At the very least, whether it was Chu Xiu or Taoist Wuyang, they could not truly cooperate intimately. Mei Qinglian sat beside Chu Xiu and raised her eyebrows, saying, "These fellows from the Shadow Mountain sect have changed their minds and left so quickly?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "What else can they do if they don't leave? Falling out before the Zhenwu Hall has even been opened won't look good for either side. The only difference is that they will suffer more. The Shadow Mountain sect has disappeared for so many years. One can imagine that their days have not been easy. It wasn't easy for them to find a place like the Northern Yen. They won't give it up so easily. Let's not care about them for now. Like I said, we will do our own things and they will do theirs. We won't interfere with each other. If anyone crosses the line, we will chop off the hand that reaches out." Without Taoist Wuyang's interference, Chu Xiu directly set the date for the Zhenwu Hall's opening to be 3 days later. At the same time, he sent out invitations to the entire Northern Yen martial world to attend the ceremony. As soon as the invitations were sent out, the entire Northern Yen martial world was in an uproar. Chu Xiu had actually returned. In the past, in the Northern Yen alliance, the only true loss was the Memorial Village. At that time, Chu Xiu only came to destroy the Northern Yen alliance. He didn't have the strength to slaughter the entire Northern Yen alliance. Therefore, the forces that participated in the alliance at that time were not worried about what would happen to Chu Xiu. Even if Chu Xiu survived this disaster, he would definitely choose to keep a low profile and stabilize his current strength. In the end, who would have thought that Xiang Long would recruit Chu Xiu as the governor of the Zhenwu Hall? Just listen to the name, the Zhenwu Hall. Who was this aimed at? In a mountain village at the junction of the Northern Yen Alliance and the eastern and western regions, this was where the headquarters of the giant spirit gang was located. Feng Datong gripped the invitation that Chu Xiu had sent over with a frown. Below him were some martial artists at the Unity of Heaven and Man realm. They were all the higher-ups of the giant spirit gang. At this time an old man said bitterly, "What did I say? Our giant spirit gang should not have been involved in those messy things." Now, Chu Xiu actually returned to the Northern Yen Alliance, and even cooperated with the Northern Yen Imperial Court. If Chu Xiu comes to deal with our giant spirit gang, what can we do? Now that the invitation has been sent, should we go or not? Feng Datong glanced at him coldly and said, "Feng Tianyi, are you blaming me? Am I not thinking about the giant spirit gang?" Feng Tianyi's strength was not weak. He had reached the half-step unity of Heaven and Man realm. He was the great elder of the giant spirit gang. His seniority was even higher than Feng Datong. Therefore, he often raised objections to some matters of the giant spirit gang. Relying on his seniority, his words were somewhat disrespectful to Feng Datong as the gang leader. Feng Tianyi snorted coldly and said, "I did not say that, but you are the gang leader. The future of tens of thousands of members of the giant spirit gang is in your hands. It does not matter if you make a wrong decision, but it will cause the destruction of the century-old foundation of the giant spirit gang." Seeing that the tension between the two sides was getting thicker and thicker, a middle-aged martial artist in brocade clothes with a square face immediately stood up to smooth things over and said, "The gang leader is also thinking about the giant spirit gang. Who knew that the emperor would cooperate with Chu Xiu? He knew that he was a member of the Yinma clan, but he still let him take charge of the Zhenwu Hall. Xiang Long's doing this is tantamount to asking a tiger for its skin. I think he is old and confused. A wise ruler is about to become a fatuous ruler. And look at the name he came up with, Zhenwu Zhenwu. Doesn't it mean to suppress our Northern Yen Wulin? Even if there is no Chu Xiu, there will probably be someone else in charge of the Zhenwu Hall." This middle-aged man was called Shen Feiying, the deputy gang leader of the giant spirit gang. He was also Feng Datong's sworn brother and his #1 confidant. The main reason why Feng Tianyi was dissatisfied with Feng Datong was that he appointed people by favoritism. He was the great elder and had a high seniority. He did not have any thoughts about the position of deputy gang leader, but he was dissatisfied with Feng Datong promoting his sworn brother to the position of deputy gang leader as soon as he came to power. Feng Tianyi said with a cold face. Well, what you said is reasonable. Then, the opening of the Zhenwu Hall. Should we go or not? Feng Dotong snorted coldly and said, Go for what? Don't you understand what Chu Xiu means? He is here to establish his prestige. To tell the whole northern Yan Wulin that he, Chu Xiu, is back. Don't worry, the Zhenwu Hall is against the whole northern Yan Wulin. Once this Chu Xiu dares to make a big move, the other righteous sects of northern Yan will not sit idly by. Don't worry about him. The Jianghu and the imperial court had always been the opposite of each other. People in the Jianghu had to consider the reactions of many parties when they killed each other, let alone the imperial court. If the imperial court did such an outrageous thing without warning, it would definitely cause the hostility of the whole Jianghu, and the matter would be completely blown up. Chapter 674. The establishment of the Zhenwu Hall not only made the giant spirit gang nervous. In fact, all the sects who received the news were the same. Of course, some big sects still had some confidence. For example, for old peak powers like the Drift Snow City and the Huangfu clan, their clans would have some old ancestors who were in seclusion. When they truly faced a crisis, their trump cards would definitely be more terrifying than what the outsiders saw. And when the Great Light Temple received the invitation, they didn't send it to the abbot at all. They threw it away directly. For the current Great Light Temple, they had the entire underworld in their sights. They were not in the mood to continue messing around with Chu Xiu and the others in the northern Yan. As long as Chu Xiu didn't provoke the Great Light Temple, the Great Light Temple couldn't be bothered with Chu Xiu. Therefore, the entire northern Yan martial arts world chose to deal with it in silence under this strange atmosphere. 3 days later, the Zhenwu Hall was officially opened, but it was deserted. Not to mention the sects in the underworld, even Taoist Wu Yang didn't come. He had fallen out with Chu Xiu. From now on, he was only responsible for internal affairs. He didn't intend to intervene in the things that Chu Xiu was responsible for. At least for the time being, he wouldn't have any violent conflicts with Chu Xiu. Of course, he wouldn't come to support Chu Xiu. At this moment, Xiang Wu walked into the lobby of the Zhenwu Hall with a fruit basket in his hand. It was full of bananas. Xiang Wu handed the banana basket to Tang Ye, who came over. He looked around and said, This is a congratulatory gift for the opening of the hall. It is a great tonic to strengthen your sex drive. Speaking of which, your Zhenwu Hall has a bad start. The opening of the hall is so deserted that there isn't even a single supporter? Your Majesty, why don't you use the power of the Northern Yan court to announce it to the world? Chu Xiu's expression was a little weird. A basket of bananas is the gift? Bananas can strengthen sex drive? Where did Xiang Wu come up with this conclusion? Actually, it wasn't that Xiang Wu was stingy. This thing only grew in the southern barbarians and a small part of West Chu. It wasn't easy to eat fresh bananas in the northern Yan, and this thing was quite expensive. Chu Xiu asked someone to serve a cup of tea to Xiang Wu. He said, Today the front door is deserted, but perhaps the next day it will be crowded like a marketplace? Thank you, Marquis, for coming to support us. What other advice does Marquis have? Xiang Wu and Chu Xiu didn't have much of a friendship. Although the two of them had chatted, they could only be regarded as acquaintances nodding their heads. At most, they just didn't have any ill feelings towards each other. In the end, Xiang Wu came to support him personally and gave him a basket of precious bananas. He probably didn't just want to befriend Chu Xiu. Xiang Wu laughed and said, I can't say that I want to teach you. I just want you to do me a small favor. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, What small favor? Xiang Wu said, That old brat Feng Datong from the Giant Spirit Gang participated in the Demon Killing Alliance's attack on you last time. To be honest, that old brat's strength isn't that great. He looks like a big man, but he's good at doing business. The trade route from northern Yan to eastern Qi has been well managed by him. The Giant Spirit Gang is very rich. Just the inner sect members are in the tens of thousands, spanning across northern Yan and eastern Qi. If you make a move against the Giant Spirit Gang, you can take the gang's income. Help me keep the trade route, don't destroy it. Chu Xiu said in surprise, Marquis is short on money? But with the Giant Spirit Gang's strength, they can't stop Marquis. If you want to destroy the Giant Spirit Gang and take their trade route, it's very simple. At Xiang Wu's level, ordinary money should be nothing to him. Some precious cultivation resources are the most important. Xiang Wu sighed helplessly and said, "Of course I'm short on money. As one of the 5 armies of the state, the West Hill Army's daily expenses are enough. But you also have a lot of subordinates. You should know that if you want your subordinates to be convinced, you must at least come up with something real. You want your subordinates to risk their lives for you just to feed them. How can it be so simple? As a general, I need a lot of money. Do you think I don't need to spend money to eat bananas? Do you think I don't need to spend money to reward my subordinates? If my subordinates die in battle, apart from the compensation given by the court, don't I, as a general, need to express my gratitude?" Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows. Xiang Wu was indeed not so simple. He looked mischievous, but in fact, his ability was not weak. According to Chu Xiu's knowledge, the West Hill Army should be the weakest among the 5 armies of the state. But since Xiang Wu became a general, it only took a few years for the West Hill Army to develop to the point where it was not inferior to the other 4 armies. This was already not easy. Xiang Wu suddenly said in a low voice, "As for why I don't do it myself, you should be able to guess that the place where the giant spirit gang is located is not under my jurisdiction. Also, as the Northern Yen general, if I destroy the giant spirit gang for my own selfish desires, the monks of the Great Light Temple might come and cause trouble. Although I'm not afraid of them, I don't want to be punished by His Majesty." Chu Xiu nodded in understanding. The Northern Yen court was not a monolithic block. At least it was the case between the 5 armies of the state. Otherwise, Xiang Wu wouldn't have come looking for him. He would have just told the general in charge of the giant spirit gang's territory. Chu Xiu suddenly asked, "Marquis, do you believe that the Zhenwu Hall can stand firm in the Northern Yen?" Xiang Wu stood up and said with a smile, "To be honest, I don't believe you. It's just a bet. If I win, you will be my friend. In the future, if you need me in the Northern Yen court, just look for me. If I lose, I will only lose a basket of bananas." After saying this, Xiang Wu turned and left. Mei Qinglian squinted her eyes and said, "Xiang Wu is a very interesting guy." Chu Xiu nodded and said, "Very interesting. He is open and above board." Xiang Wu's words were very direct. He was investing in advance. If Chu Xiu could stand firm and help him get the trade route of the giant spirit gang, he would return the favor and help Chu Xiu. On the other hand, there was no need to say more. Tanya carried a basket of bananas and said, "My lord, what about these bananas?" Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "Divide them. After eating, it's time to work." As he said this, Chu Xiu's eyes revealed a touch of coldness. Tanya nodded and was about to take the bananas out when Mei Qinglian waved her hand and said, "Give me one." Tanya looked at Mei Qinglian strangely. Didn't Xiang Wu say that this thing was used to strengthen one's sex drive? Women also need to strengthen their sex drive? At the border of Eastern Yen, in Qi River Commandery, Chu Xiu only brought Mei Qinglian, Tanya and a dozen other people to hide here. Actually, Chu Xiu didn't intend to make a move on the giant spirit gang so quickly. After all, the other party was one of the 6 major gangs. Their identity was a bit special. Chu Xiu was prepared to deal with them one by one. But because of Xiang Wu's visit and the fact that Feng Datong attacked him on the demon-killing alliance, Chu Xiu also gave him a chance, but he didn't cherish it. As a result, it was fine to put him as the main target. However, Mei Qinglian was puzzled when she saw that Chu Xiu had only brought a dozen or so people with him. "It's just the giant spirit gang. Go straight to their door and kill Feng Datong. The rest are just a bunch of useless people. Why are you still hiding here?" In the inn, Mei Qinglian asked Chu Xiu in confusion. Chu Xiu poured himself a cup of tea and said, "Killing Feng Datong is easy. Destroying the giant spirit gang is also easy. But what next? Destroy the divine martial sect? The divine martial sect can be destroyed. But what about again? Provoke old ancestor Huang Fu and the old ancestor of the floating snow city in the extreme north, and then become the enemy of the entire Northern Yen martial world. Then, provoke the Great Light Temple, and finally make things big enough for Xianglong to push us out to be the scapegoats?" Mei Qinglian rubbed her head. She wasn't good at these big picture things. Otherwise, she wouldn't be the holy lady of the Yin demon sect, but the sect leader. "Then what do you plan to do?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Fighting and killing isn't a good way to solve the problem. Killing Feng Datong and controlling the giant spirit gang don't actually conflict." Just as Mei Qinglian was about to ask more, Tanya suddenly walked in and placed a pile of information in front of Chu Xiao. Lord, the information about the upper echelons of the giant spirit gang is all here. During the time that Chu Xiao and the others had been hiding in Qi River Commandery, they had actually been collecting information about the giant spirit gang. The giant spirit gang dominated Qi River Commandery, and more than half of the gang members were there. With so many people, it wasn't too difficult to find out these things. Mei Qinglian suddenly said, "You want to drive a wedge between the upper echelons of the giant spirit gang and make them kill each other?" Chu Xiao put down the information in his hand and threw it to Mei Qinglian. "The giant spirit gang doesn't need us to drive a wedge between them. What I want to do is just to help someone." Mei Qinglian flipped through the information and said after a while, "Is it the Grand Elder of the giant spirit gang, Feng Tianyi? This person can be used. He has a lot of seniority in the giant spirit gang, and he often contradicts Feng Datong. We can use him." Chu Xiao smiled. "I'm not talking about Feng Tianyi, but him. Feng Datong's sworn brother, Shen Feiying." Mei Qinglian frowned. "Why would you choose him?" "Shen Feiying is Feng Datong's sworn brother. When Feng Datong first became the gang leader, he promoted Shen Feiying, who was just a Joss master, to a branch leader. In the end, he made him the deputy leader and trusted him. Moreover, Shen Feiying was even more grateful. As long as it was Feng Datong's order, he would carry it out unconditionally. He could be said to be Feng Datong's right-hand man. How can you drive a wedge between such a person? I'm afraid that in the end, you still have to use force." Chu Xiao shook his head. "You're wrong about this. Sometimes, a brother who seems to be willing to sacrifice himself for you actually wants to stab you in his heart. You may know a person's face, but you don't know their heart. Everyone has a devil in their heart. Holy lady, your beauty technique can see through people's hearts, but in fact, you're just forcefully changing people's hearts. The real heart is more complicated than you think." Mei Qinglian nodded thoughtfully, but then she suddenly realized that she was older than Chu Xiao. Why did Chu Xiao look like he could see through the world? Chapter 675. Mei Qinglian, the holy maiden of the Yin demon sect, was quite talented. When they first met, Chu Xiao was shocked, thinking that he had discovered the reason for the huge change in the Guanzhong torture room in the original plot. In the end, Chu Xiao found out that this holy maiden was sometimes very naive. The huge change in the Guanzhong torture room had nothing to do with her. Age and scheming were not necessarily related. There were many people who became more muddle-headed as they got older. In a big house outside Qi Water County City, Shen Feiying returned home. With the help of his concubine, he washed away his fatigue. After changing his clothes, he went to the study room alone and began to deal with some chores related to the giant spirit gang. It was not easy for him to be the deputy gang leader. During the day, he had to participate in some important matters of the giant spirit gang. At night, he had to deal with some chores. He was even busier than the gang leader. Of course, this couldn't be helped. As the leader, Feng Datong naturally couldn't manage everything, and these matters couldn't be decided casually. Therefore, these big and small matters naturally fell to him, the deputy leader. At midnight, when Shen Feiying had finished all the matters for the day and was about to return to his room to rest, he suddenly found that there was a person sitting in his study room, staring at him in the dark. In an instant, Shen Feiying's hair stood on end. He subconsciously wanted to shout for help. He didn't believe in ghosts, but if someone could appear beside him without him noticing, then that person's cultivation must be terrifyingly powerful. Chu Xiao stretched out a finger and shook it gently. "Leader Shen, calm down. Don't shout. If you shout, you'll be forcing me to kill you." Shen Feiying calmed down and said in a deep voice, "Who are you? Did I, Shen Feiying, do something wrong to offend you? Please speak clearly." Chu Xiao shook his head and said, "Leader Shen, you do things meticulously. How could you offend someone? I have no ill intentions towards you this time. On the contrary, I am here to help you. I believe Leader Shen has heard of my name. I am Chu Xiao." Shen Feiying looked at Chu Xiao walking out of the darkness and looked at his seemingly young face. At this time, in Shen Feiying's heart, Chu Xiao was no different from an evil spirit. They were still talking about Chu Xiao before, but now Chu Xiao had appeared in front of him. Shen Feiying's figure retreated as he said, "Official Chu, listen to me. The giant spirit gang can do nothing about this matter. Shen Feiying retreated as he said, "Sir Chu, listen to me. There's nothing the giant spirit gang can do about this. The giant spirit gang does not belong to the righteous martial arts world. We were bewitched by Nie Rinlong to attack you. As for the opening of the Zhenwu Hall a few days ago, we originally wanted to go, but the entire Northern Yen martial arts world did not move. If we came alone, we would definitely become the target of public criticism. The entire Northern Yen martial arts world would not tolerate us." Chu Xiu said lightly, "Leader Shen, don't be so agitated. I understand what you said. I said that I am here to help you this time. Everything that the giant spirit gang did was done by Fang Datong alone. I, Chu Xiu, am a person who distinguishes between kindness and hatred. Fang Datong's karma will naturally be settled by Fang Datong. I will not implicate others." Shen Feiying stopped retreating. There was a trace of doubt in his eyes. Since Chu Xiu said that he would not implicate others, what did he mean by appearing here now? Chu Xiu walked slowly, and his voice seemed to have a strange magic. "Leader Shen, Fang Datong's mistake should naturally be borne by Fang Datong alone, but if the giant spirit gang is implicated, wouldn't it be a pity? This time I only came to kill the evil leader. I don't know if Leader Shen is willing to control the giant spirit gang after Fang Datong's death and stand on the side of the Zhenwu Hall?" Hearing Chu Xiu's words, Shen Feiying finally knew what Chu Xiu meant. He was asking him to be a traitor and betray Fang Datong. "Impossible!" Shen Feiying shouted in a low voice. "Leader treats me like a brother. I have my current status because of Leader's support. Now you want me to betray Leader? I can't do it." Chu Xiu chuckled and said, "Can't do it? Leader Shen, do I have to make things so obvious? You're Fang Datong's sworn brother, and you're even promoted by him. In the Eagle Gang, you're obedient to him, and he's suppressing Feng Tianyi and the other elders of the giant spirit gang because of your obedience. But in fact, in the entire giant spirit gang, the person who wants Fang Datong dead the most is actually you." Shen Feiying's face suddenly changed, and he shouted in a low voice, "Nonsense!" Chu Xiu sat opposite Shen Feiying and said faintly, "You don't have to act in front of me. Leader Shen, in fact, you have always been very unconvinced in your heart, right? In the past, you and Fang Datong were both ordinary members of the giant spirit gang. However, when the previous gang leader was choosing his wife, you were one step away from being chosen. Fang Datong became the previous gang leader's personal follower, eventually becoming his trusted aide and taking over the position of gang leader. You always thought that Fang Datong was not as good as you, but he was not as lucky as Fang Datong. All these years, you seem to be helping Fang Datong without the slightest selfishness, but in fact, you are making Fang Datong more headstrong. You agree to some of Fang Datong's good suggestions, but you don't hesitate to implement the bad suggestions, and even add fuel to the fire. Is this something a brother can do? Also, all these years, you have been secretly cultivating confidence. Although everyone in the upper echelons of the giant spirit gang is doing this, if you really don't have the slightest selfishness, why do you do it? Gang leader Shen, you don't have to act anymore. You're looking forward to the day when Fang Datong betrays everyone and becomes the gang leader, but you've forgotten that Fang Datong is a martial Dao grandmaster. In any sect, strength is the most important. As long as you don't break through to martial Dao grandmaster, you don't have the qualifications to fall out with Fang Datong. However, the giant spirit gang is at the bottom of the 6 major gangs. You have money, but you can't buy those precious cultivation resources. The entire giant spirit gang can only support Fang Datong as a martial Dao grandmaster. How long will it take for you to step into this realm? I'm giving you this chance now, and it's the last chance you can grasp. You can't refuse, and you have no reason to refuse." Chu Xiu looked straight at Shen Feiying as if he could see the bottom of his heart. This time, Chu Xiu really did not use mental secret techniques such as the mental demon rotation technique or the soul extinguishing technique to affect Shen Feiying's mind. The other party was already deep in the heart demon. Just as Chu Xiu said, in the face of this situation, Shen Feiying could not refuse, nor did he have any reason to refuse. At this moment, Shen Feiying was already sweating profusely. He said in a hoarse voice, "How did you know all this?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "If you don't want people to know, don't do it. Leader Shen, all your actions can't stand up to scrutiny. It's just that no one has investigated this, and no one has thought about it. But it happens that I always like to think of people in a dark light. You should be glad that Feng Datong is not a suspicious person, nor is he a careful person. Otherwise, your little tricks will be a big taboo in Feng Datong's eyes. Shen Feiying sat down dejectedly. He thought that he had been very tolerant all these years, but he did not expect that in the eyes of someone with ulterior motives, he was full of loopholes. What do you want me to do? Shen Feiying asked directly. Chu Xiao said indifferently, It's very simple. I just need you to stand on my side. I can help you solve all the opposition forces of the giant spirit gang. Of course, you can't betray them. Just wait and see. From tomorrow onwards, you will really be Leader Shen, and there will be no deputy in front of it. After saying that, Chu Xiao's figure disappeared. Shen Feiying, who was in a daze, did not even notice how Chu Xiao had left. Staring outside, Shen Feiying suddenly clenched his fists, and a ferocious expression appeared on his face. It was like a completely different person from the gentle appearance that he usually showed in the giant spirit gang. His choice was not wrong. How much had he done for the giant spirit gang all these years? More than what Feng Datong had done. Besides his strength, what qualifications did Feng Datong have to be the leader? Moreover, his strength was supported by the resources of the entire giant spirit gang. Now it was his turn. The next morning, Shen Feiying washed up and went directly to the giant spirit gang's headquarters. However, all the gang members who saw Shen Feiying felt a little strange. Deputy Leader Shen had always been very kind before. When he saw ordinary gang members, he would greet them. Why was his expression so gloomy today? Could it be that something happened? When he arrived at the meeting hall, Feng Datong, Feng Tianyi, and the other elders were all there. Seeing Shen Feiying, Feng Datong hurriedly greeted him and said with a smile, Brother, you're here. Sit. I have good news. After Shen Feiying sat down, he said with a blank expression, Oh, what good news? Feng Datong said proudly, Before, we were still thinking about whether to go to the opening ceremony of the Zhenwu Hall. Now, we don't have to worry about it anymore. Chu Xiao's so-called Zhenwu Hall is just a decoration. In the entire Northern Yen martial arts world, no gang, big or small, went. Even the chief steward who is in charge of the Zhenwu Hall with Chu Xiao did not go. With internal and external troubles, I don't think his Zhenwu Hall will last long. Feng Tianyi frowned and said, Then we also need to be careful. Our giant spirit gang is not as strong as the drifting snow city in the extreme north. We can't withstand any storms. Feng Datong frowned. He was just about to say something when he saw Shen Feiying stand up and speak. A smile suddenly appeared on his face. Shen Feiying was his confidant and his sworn brother. Most of the time, it was not good for him to argue with others directly as the leader. It was Shen Feiying who did it for him. Chapter 676. Feng Datong was very familiar with the scene in front of him. Before, when there was a dispute in the gang, he was the one who spoke first, and then Shen Feiying would stand on his side and fight for him. After all, Feng Tianyi and others were the elders of the giant spirit gang. As the gang leader, if he always quarreled with them, it would be too embarrassing. Therefore, these things were usually handled by Shen Feiying. So now seeing Shen Feiying stand up, Feng Datong was very relieved. This sworn brother of his had never let him down. Shen Feiying was the main reason why he was able to hold his position as the gang leader in such a stable manner. However, after Shen Feiying stood up, he turned his eyes to Feng Dong. Does the gang leader think this is a good thing? Feng Datong did not react. He was stunned and said, If it's not a good thing, what else can it be? Shen Feiying said expressionlessly, The Zhenwu Hall is a decoration, but Chu Xiao is not a decoration. When the demon-killing alliance was destroyed, didn't you see the power of Chu Xiao? Even Ye Renlong died in his hands. Why do you think that Chu Xiao is a decoration? The Northern Yen Imperial Court has long wanted to take action against our Northern Yen martial arts. Now the Imperial Court has spent so much effort to get Chu Xiao to establish the Zhenwu Hall. Why do you think that the Zhenwu Hall is a decoration? Our giant spirit gang does not have a strong foundation like the Northern Floating Snow City or the Huangfu clan. One wrong step will lead to many mistakes. Tens of thousands of lives of our giant spirit gang are in the hands of the gang leader. One word from you can affect the survival of our giant spirit gang. In the beginning, you chose to join the demon-killing alliance. As a result, the demon-killing alliance was defeated. Our giant spirit gang offended a great enemy like Chu Xiao for no reason. Now that Chu Xiao has established the Zhenwu Hall, if our giant spirit gang took the initiative to apologize when he opened the Zhenwu Hall and ease the hatred, there was still room for a solution. But now everything is over. You still say that this is a good thing. Is this really a good thing? Shen Feiying's words stunned everyone present. In the past, these elders of the giant spirit gang didn't get along with Feng Datong because of some trivial matters. For example, Feng Tianyi just couldn't stand Feng Datong's slack appearance. But now, Shen Feiying's words were really heavy. This was simply accusing Feng Datong of being muddle-headed and stupid, bringing the giant spirit gang into a crisis. After all, Feng Datong was a martial Dao grandmaster and the leader of the giant spirit gang. Even elders like Feng Tianyi did not dare to say such words to Feng Datong because of their seniority. Was Shen Feiying crazy? Moreover, everyone in the giant spirit gang knew that Shen Feiying was Feng Datong's sworn brother. To put it bluntly, he was Feng Datong's lackey, an existence akin to a bug. However, he dared to say such things about Feng Datong today. If he wasn't crazy, then what was? After Feng Datong recovered from his shock, he was also enraged. He suddenly stood up and shouted angrily, "Shen Feiying! Are you crazy? Say it again if you dare." He never expected that Shen Feiying, who had always been submissive and obedient to him, would actually say such words. Shen Feiying's expression was cold as he said, "Just say it, Feng Datong. You don't deserve to be the leader. The old leader passed the position to you. After so many years, has the giant spirit gang's strength grown at all? On the contrary, under your leadership, the giant spirit gang is in danger at every step. Do you have the face to face the old leader?" Everyone present was dumbfounded. At this time, they could already be sure that Shen Feiying was really crazy. Feng Datong took a deep breath and said coldly, "Men, help the deputy leader down. He's not feeling well and can't interfere with the gang's affairs for the time being." Turning around to look at Shen Feiying, Feng Datong said coldly, "Considering that we're brothers, I won't kill you. Go back and reflect on yourself." A strange smile appeared on Shen Feiying's face as he said, "You won't kill me because we're brothers? Feng Datong, have you ever truly treated me as a brother all these years? Ridiculous. I don't need you to spare me either. The outcome of the battle is still unknown. Do you think that you can still be the leader?" There was no fear on Shen Feiying's face. Feng Datong frowned and said, "What do you mean?" Right at this time, a voice suddenly came from outside the hall. "What he means is that a dead person can't be the leader. Feng Datong, I gave you a chance back then, but sadly, you didn't cherish it. Letting you live for so long, you should feel grateful. Now, it's time for me to take it back." Chu Xiao and Mei Qinglian brought over a dozen martial artists and walked into the hall. Along the way, the martial artists who wanted to rush over or escape were casually glanced at by Mei Qinglian. Powerful mental strength immediately penetrated their minds, making them stand dumbfounded on the spot. Chu Xiao. Feng Datong's expression suddenly changed. He really did not expect that Chu Xiao would be the first to look for him. Back then, the people who made a move at the Fiend Extermination Summit, there were those stronger than him, and there were also those weaker than him. There were even many who were more ruthless than him. In the end, Chu Xiao did not go to look for these people, but he came to find him first. This was something that Feng Datong really did not expect. Actually, if he wanted to blame something, he could only blame Feng Datong for being unlucky. Originally, Chu Xiao indeed wanted to make a move from the bottom up. In the end, who asked the giant spirit gang to be overflowing with wealth and was targeted by Xiang Wu. Since Chu Xiao took Xiang Wu's banana, then he also conveniently made the giant spirit gang his primary target. Feng Datong looked viciously at Shen Feiying standing beside Chu Xiao and roared angrily, "Shen Feiying! You actually betrayed me, betrayed the giant spirit gang." Shen Feiying snorted coldly and said, "I didn't betray you. All these years, I don't owe you anything. It's all you who owe me. And I have no intention of betraying the giant spirit gang. All these years, I have put in more effort for the giant spirit gang than you." Official Chu cooperated with the Northern Yen court to establish the Zhenwu Hall. The entire Northern Yen pugilistic world will fall into a storm and turmoil. With the strength of the giant spirit gang, We must stand on the right side in order to survive this storm. Feng Datong, you already stood on the wrong side last time. I won't make the same mistake a second time. Chu Xiu said calmly. A wise man submits to circumstances. Sect leader Shen is very sensible. As for you, Feng Datong, forget it. I won't say any more. A dead person doesn't need to be sensible. Seeing Chu Xiu walking towards him, Feng Datong hurriedly shouted, Chu Xiu, you kill me at will. Don't you consider the reaction of the Northern Yen pugilistic world? Your Zhenwu Hall wants to suppress the Northern Yen pugilistic world. In the end, you attacked the giant spirit gang, one of the 6 major gangs. Have you considered the consequences? Chu Xiu sneered and said, people should know themselves. Do you deserve to be called righteous in the righteous pugilistic world? Moreover, I didn't attack your giant spirit gang. The only person I want to kill is you. Before Chu Xiu's voice fell, Feng Datong turned and fled. He had already heard the killing intent in Chu Xiu's words. If he didn't run now, when would he run? Looking at Feng Datong's movements, Chu Xiu didn't chase after him. He just took a long breath and pulled the bow in his hand to the fullest. Using his spirit as the bow and his spiritual force as the arrow, the Soul Destroyer arrow burst out. The spiritual force of nothingness was almost condensed into a substance. It made a whistling sound, shaking the heads of everyone present. Although the Soul Destroyer arrow was condensed by spiritual force, the arrow affected the surrounding chi of heaven and earth, forming a cyclone. Everyone could also see the trajectory of the arrow. The strange thing was that the arrow was actually off. With Chu Xiu's strength, this arrow could actually be off? And what was even more strange was that as Chu Xiu's arrow burst out, Feng Datong was shocked. He subconsciously dodged, but he just dodged the trajectory of the Soul Destroyer arrow. It was as if he took the initiative to hit the Soul Destroyer arrow. There was a loud explosion. In an instant, Feng Datong's spirit was severely injured. In an instant, blood flowed from his 7 orifices. His eyes flashed with unconcealable horror. He endured the severe pain of his spirit being severely injured and wanted to escape, but Chu Xiu walked towards him casually and gently pointed his finger. Feng Datong roared angrily. He gathered all the strength in his body and punched. Under Chu Xiu's finger, the aura of death filled the air and everything withered. Everything was covered by the pitch-black aura of death. With a soft pu sound, a bloody hole appeared on Feng Datong's forehead, but strangely, not a single drop of blood flowed out. Feng Datong's corpse had even turned gray, and like a zombie, it fell to the ground with a loud thud. At this moment, everyone present looked at Chu Xiu with a trace of horror in their eyes. Although Feng Datong wasn't on the ranking list, he was still a famous martial artist in the Jianghu. He was also the leader of the giant spirit gang. He had been a martial arts grandmaster for more than a decade and had accumulated a lot of experience. But in the end, in the hands of Chu Xiu, Feng Datong was directly killed in 2 moves. He was as weak as a child. Not only were the people of the giant spirit gang shocked, but Mei Qinglian was also the same. She knew Chu Xiu's strength. Although she also knew that Chu Xiu was already so strong when he was in the oneness of heaven and man realm, and now that Chu Xiu had become a martial arts grandmaster and had condensed the invincible demon pill, his strength would definitely be stronger. But she didn't expect that Chu Xiu would be so strong that he could kill martial arts grandmasters as if he was slaughtering dogs. Even if the current Mei Qinglian fought with Chu Xiu, Mei Qinglian wouldn't be confident. Of course, this was also related to the fact that the Qi Nu art was not good at head-on fierce fighting. Some people couldn't be measured by the realm. After ordinary martial artists stepped into the martial arts grandmaster realm, they only thought about how to preserve their strength. For them that was the peak. For people like Chu Xiu, the peak of these people was just the starting point for Chu Xiu. Shen Feiying, who was at the side, had a confused look in his eyes. Feng Datong died just like that? Although he had rehearsed this scene countless times in his dreams, Shen Feiying couldn't react to it now that it had become reality. At the same time, he felt a little complicated. After all, he and Feng Datong had been brothers for so many years, and their children had even acknowledged each other as their godfather. In the end, Feng Datong died here. Although he was not the one who killed him, it had a lot to do with him. At that moment, Chu Xiu walked over and patted Shen Feiying's shoulder. He said in a low voice, "There are some things that can't be undone once done. Sect leader Shen, it's time for you to succeed the position." Chapter 677. Sitting in Fang Datong's original seat, Shen Feiying still felt a little confused. Did he become the leader of the giant spirit gang? At this time, Feng Tianyi, the great elder of the giant spirit gang, who had been in shock, stood up and pointed at Shen Feiying and shouted angrily, "You are a traitor. What qualifications do you have to be the leader of our giant spirit gang? Shen Feiying, you colluded with the enemy and killed the leader. What face do you have to see the ancestors of our giant spirit gang?" Chu Xiu looked at Feng Tianyi with a slightly surprised look. He could see that Feng Tianyi was very afraid. The hand he pointed at Shen Feiying with was trembling. Half of it was anger, and the other half was fear. Fang Datong died so easily in the hands of Chu Xiu, and now he stood up against Shen Feiying. He was afraid that it would be the same. But even knowing this, Feng Tianyi still stood up. Perhaps it was because of the cultivation of the previous leader that he could not sit back and watch the giant spirit gang fall into the hands of villains at this critical moment. Or perhaps it was because he was unwilling to bow down to the despotic power of Chu Xiu and the others. Before Shen Feiying spoke, Chu Xiu looked at Feng Tianyi and said faintly, "Elder Feng, I'll give you a chance to reorganize your words. Take back what you said. Fang Datong is dead, but the giant spirit gang is still here. You didn't get along with Fang Datong before. Why do you want to die for him now?" Feng Tianyi said coldly, "Even if you let me say it 100 times, I will say the same thing. Even if Fang Datong failed as the leader, he was still the successor personally chosen by the previous leader. And Shen Feiying did not get the position right. It is impossible for me to recognize him as the leader." To be honest, Feng Tianyi's attitude at this time made Chu Xiu very surprised. Shen Feiying was Fang Datong's sworn brother, but he secretly wanted Fang Datong to die quickly. And Feng Tianyi, the great elder who had always disagreed with Fang Datong, still stubbornly did not want to recognize Shen Feiying's position after Fang Datong died. If Fang Datong could see this scene at this time, who knew what he would think? There were not many people like Feng Tianyi who could stick to their principles under the threat of death, and Chu Xiu admired him very much. Therefore, Chu Xiu directly said indifferently, "Since that's the case, then I'll send you to see Fang Datong. I believe that Fang Datong will be very happy to see someone in the giant spirit gang willing to accompany him." With that, Chu Xiu's eyes suddenly shone with black light. He pushed the soul-moving technique of heaven and earth to the limit, invading Feng Tianyi's body with brutal spirit in basically a split second, completely crushing his soul. In an instant, Feng Tianyi's 7 orifices were bleeding. His body fell to the ground and kept twitching. In the end, he was completely lifeless. Admiration was one thing, but the giant spirit gang didn't need someone with a backbone like Feng Tianyi right now. What Chu Xiu needed was an obedient dog. When Elder Zhang in the other houses saw this scene, he was shocked. He quickly bowed and said, "Subordinate greets official Chu, greets gang leader." People with backbone were always the minority. Under the threat of life and death, being a dog was actually a good choice. Chu Xiu patted Shen Feiying's shoulder and said, "I believe you will handle the next things well. You don't know less about the giant spirit gang than Fang Datong." As he spoke, Chu Xiu threw a roll of paper to Shen Feiying and said, "On behalf of the giant spirit gang, sign this thing." Shen Feiying took the thing curiously and looked at it carefully, but the more he looked, the uglier his face became. Mei Qinglian also glanced at it curiously and said, "What is this?" Chu Xiu said, "The Zhenwu Hall Agreement Treaty. Signing this thing is equivalent to agreeing to the control of the Zhenwu Hall. Everything must be done according to the rules of the Zhenwu Hall, but at the same time, the Zhenwu Hall will also protect them." Looking at Shen Feiying's ugly face, Mei Qinglian could be sure that the content of this thing was definitely not as simple as Chu Xiu said. In fact, this was indeed the case. Chu Xiu's treaty was not harsh, but it could be regarded as excessive. In fact, this so-called treaty could be summed up in 2 words. That was, listen to the words of the Zhenwu Hall and listen to the words of Chu Xiu. After signing this treaty, all the affairs of the giant spirit gang, big or small, had to be reported to the Zhenwu Hall before they could take action. They could no longer fight and kill whoever they wanted like before. But at the same time, the Zhenwu Hall would also protect these forces who had signed the agreement and ensure their safety. It was not known whether the latter promise was true or not, but after signing it, the giant spirit gang was almost equivalent to the puppet of the Zhenwu Hall and a lackey of the Zhenwu Hall. But in the end, Shen Feiying still signed it. Because if he did not sign it, he was just a puppet of Chu Xiu. As Chu Xiu said before, Since he sat on the position of the gangmaster, there was no turning back. Chu Xiao patted Shen Feiying's shoulder and said with satisfaction, "Not bad, I like people who know how to adapt to circumstances. During this time, I will stay in the giant spirit gang to hold the fort for you. Tang Ya and Zhao Chengping will follow you and help you get rid of some disobedient guys. Right, there is also the business route of the giant spirit gang. Give 80% of it to the West Hill Army's General Xiang Wu. He will send someone to take it over. Don't feel wronged. Your giant spirit gang doesn't lack those gold and silver things. Give the business route to Xiang Wu. He can simply leak some cultivation resources, and it will be enough for you to enjoy." Shen Feiying nodded helplessly. Now, he could only do whatever Chu Xiao said. However, when he really took control of the giant spirit gang, Shen Feiying's dissatisfaction with Chu Xiao gradually disappeared and turned into excitement. The excitement of becoming a real gang master. Shen Feiying's process of taking control of the giant spirit gang was actually very smooth. Although Feng Datong was the gangmaster previously, Feng Datong was actually too lazy to manage those small things. Most of the big and small affairs of the entire giant spirit gang were managed by Shen Feiying. Therefore, he was even more familiar with the giant spirit gang than Feng Datong. Moreover, as the gangmaster, Feng Datong needed a strong and majestic impression, while Shen Feiying needed to win over people's hearts. Therefore, the impression that he gave to most people was very kind, and it was easy to make people have a good impression. Although some people still had some complaints about Shen Feiying colluding with outsiders to seize the position of the gangmaster, most people did not resist. Moreover, it was useless to resist. The strength of Shen Feiying's trusted subordinates was not very good, so Chu Xiao sent Zhao Chengping and Tang Ya to help him. Zhao Chengping did things calmly, and Tang Ya was quick-witted. With the two of them, it was enough to help Shen Feiying stabilize the situation in a short period of time. And after a few days, the matter of the giant spirit gang spread. Although the giant spirit gang was one of the 6 gangs, in fact, the giant spirit gang did not seem to have much of an advantage other than having a large number of people, so their presence was slightly lower. Moreover, this time, Chu Xiao did not destroy the giant spirit gang. He only killed Feng Datong, and the giant spirit gang was still under Shen Feiying's control. Although in name, the giant spirit gang had become Chu Xiao's lackey. As soon as this matter came out, it immediately caused the entire Northern Yen pugilistic world to panic. In the end, Chu Xiao still made a move. However, regarding this matter, the Northern Yen pugilistic world was also a little conflicted. Chu Xiao did not break through the giant spirit gang with great fanfare. Strictly speaking, this matter was still considered a power struggle within the giant spirit gang. Even if they wanted to intervene, they could not find a good reason. Of course, the most important thing was that at present, the Northern Yen pugilistic world could not find a leader, and Chu Xiao did not touch their bottom line. It was not worthwhile for them to make another demon-killing alliance to deal with Chu Xiao. Of course, with the current situation of the Northern Yen pugilistic world, they could not form a big alliance. Even the Great Guangming Temple did not put their eyes on the Northern Yen pugilistic world. It had to be said that Yi Xiaonan did indeed share a considerable amount of attention and pressure for Chu Xiao, or rather, for the hidden devil lineage. For a sect at the level of the Great Guangming Temple, the moon-worshipping cult and Yi Xiaonan were the real enemies of the demonic path. As for the current Chu Xiao, he was at most a scabby disease. Although in the eyes of some knowledgeable people, Chu Xiao had unlimited potential in the future, and if he was allowed to be so arrogant, the hidden devil lineage would develop into a great enemy of the righteous path in the future. However, such people were in the minority. The eyes of the entire righteous world were still on the moon-worshipping cult. Having said that, there were still many sects and aristocratic families who were vigilant after knowing about the giant spirit gang. They carefully interrogated their confidants and even brothers around them. After all, no one wanted to be stabbed by their own people at a critical moment. In the headquarters of the giant spirit gang, Chu Xiao was leisurely checking the recent movements in the pugilistic world. As he expected, most of the Northern Yen sects did not stand up to deal with the giant spirit gang. Every family only cared about their own business. Even the Great Guangming Temple, who liked to meddle in other people's business, did not come forward. The other forces were even more too lazy to do anything. At this moment, Shen Feiying, Zhao Chengping, and Tang Ya knocked on the door and came in. Shen Feiying still had a trace of fear on his face. Seeing his expression, Chu Xiao frowned and said, What happened? Shen Feiying said with a face full of regret. Sir, Feng Datong's only son was taken away by an elder of the giant spirit gang. I did not investigate and did not stop him. Chu Xiao cast a questioning gaze at Zhao Chengping and Tang Ye. Tang Ye spread his hands and said, this matter can't be blamed on gang leader Shen. It's just that old fellow's acting was too good. So good that even I was deceived. When gang leader Shen took over the giant spirit gang, that old fellow was the first to stand up and volunteer himself. Even I could not stand that look of his. When gang leader Shen was preparing to confiscate Feng Datong's property, he was the first to stand up and volunteer himself. He looked like he had a grudge against Feng Datong for stealing his wife. In the end, who would have thought that guy would lie to everyone and directly escape with Feng Datong's accumulated wealth and his only son? By the time we were wondering if he had returned, several hours had passed. That guy had probably already escaped from Qi River Commandery. Zhao Chengping said in a low voice, this matter was our negligence. Sir, please give the order to search for these two people with all our strength. This is to prevent other sects from obtaining them and using them as a pretext. Chapter 678. Shen Feiying was terrified of Feng Datong's son's escape, while Tang Ye was indifferent. Only Zhao Chengping paid more attention to this matter. He was from the Yinma clan, so he was calm and strict. Feng Datong's son was just an ordinary young man. He was not very strong, so he escaped. The problem was that his identity was very sensitive. At the moment, there were no northern Yanjianghu people who would intervene in the affairs of the giant spirit gang. However, if Feng Datong's only son fell into the hands of some people, they might make a big deal out of it. Chu Xiao just nodded casually. To be honest, he did not care about the escape of an insignificant person. It also depended on the opponent's strength to eliminate the roots. Feng Datong's only son was not famous in Jianghu. He was just a nobody, so it was not a big deal not to kill him. When Chu Xiao wanted to kill Xin Bai, it was because of Xin Bai's strength, talent, and luck. If he was given time, he would bring a lot of trouble to himself in the future. And this Feng Datong's only son, to put it bluntly, even if Chu Xiao gave him time, he could only look up to him. He did not even have the chance to stop him. Just when Chu Xiao was about to wave his hand and let them solve it themselves, he suddenly thought of something and asked, how is Feng Datong's relationship with people in the northern Yanjianghu? Shen Feiying hesitated for a moment and said, his relationship is not bad. Feng Datong also knows that he is not strong enough. He wants to develop the giant spirit gang, so he used the giant spirit gang's financial resources to make friends with the martial arts forces in northern Yan and other places. However, there are no real top sections. After all, most of the top sects look down on the giant spirit gang, which was born in the wilderness, and they don't care about money. Therefore, those who are friends with Feng Datong are usually second-rate or third-rate forces who are not as strong as the giant spirit gang. Chu Xiao's eyes suddenly lit up and he said, that's good. You can chase Feng Datong's only son, but remember, don't chase him to death. Before Shen Feiying and Zhao Chengping could react, Tang Ye suddenly said, my lord is trying to lure the snake out of its hole? A cold glint flashed in Chu Xiao's eyes as he said, more or less. Since we are representing the imperial court now, we must act according to the imperial court's rules. At the very least, we must have a good reason to attack, right? Any force that takes in Feng Datong's only son proves that they don't put our martial suppression hall in their eyes. This is a provocation to the prestige of our martial suppression hall. Is it wrong for us to make a move? Shen Feiying could not help but feel a chill in his heart as he listened to their conversation. Chu Xiao and his gang were indeed ruthless and insidious. What was this? Entrapment. Zhao Chengping suddenly said, then what about the powers that didn't choose to take in Feng Datong's only son? Chu Xiao said indifferently, this bunch of people usually addressed Feng Datong as brothers, but now that Feng Datong is dead, and his only son has come to beg for help, they can turn a blind eye to it. It's enough to show that these people are all cold-hearted and cowardly people. It's easier to deal with such people. Just go straight to their door. Surrender or die. I believe they will make a wise choice. Shen Feiying, who was at the side, was already shivering. Only now did he feel like he was asking a tiger for its skin. Chu Xiao and his gang were simply a group of hungry wolves that would eat people without spitting out the bones. Whether you submitted or not, they would swallow you in one bite. Chu Xiu looked at the three people and said, Gang leader Shen, I will leave this matter to you. After all, my subordinates are too strong. If they make a move, I reckon there won't be anything left for you. Tang Ya and Zhao Chengping, the two of you will follow behind. You don't have to make a move at all times. Relax when it's time to relax and tighten when it's time to tighten. You guys control the degree. Understood. On a small road at the border of Qi River County, a strong, fierce-looking old man with a fierce face was quickly running away with a young man in his early 20s. This old man was the elder of the giant spirit gang, Chen Hu, and the young man was Feng Datong's only son, Feng Yun. Feng Yun's own strength was not too strong. He only reached the Xiantian realm in his early 20s. It could only be said to be average. However, because his father was Feng Datong, and Feng Datong only had one son, he doted on him very much. Therefore, he did not force him to practice martial arts too much. He also did not let Feng Yun participate in the affairs of the giant spirit gang. Therefore, Feng Yun had not seen the dangers of the underworld and was somewhat naive. When he learned of his father's death, Feng Yun almost went crazy and wanted to find Chu Xiu for revenge. At the same time, he could not believe that his father's brother, his adoptive father, the person who doted on him since he was a child, would actually become a traitor and collude with outsiders to kill his father. But the facts were in front of him. At the moment of Feng Datong's death, his house had been blocked by Shen Feiying's people. Even if Feng Yun wanted to find someone to avenge his death, he could not find them. When Chen Hu brought people to search his house, Feng Yun was even ready to fight to the death. He even directly cursed Chen Hu, cursing him extremely harshly. Feng Yun knew Chen Hu because Chen Hu was also one of the few senior elders in the giant spirit gang. His status was not much worse than Feng Tianyi. It was this person who used to stand on Feng Tianyi's side against his father. Usually, when Feng Datong returned home, he would scold these elders. Chen Hu was one of the people who often appeared in his mouth. Therefore, Feng Yun also subconsciously thought that Chen Hu was taking this opportunity to take revenge. He did not expect Chen Hu to express his true intentions, deceive everyone, and escape with him. Along the way, Chen Hu tried his best to prepare the best food for him, and even desperately blocked the pursuers. This old man who looked like a fiendish monster, in Feng Yun's eyes, had become a lot kinder. After leaving the territory of Qi Shui County, Chen Hu finally breathed a sigh of relief. He was an old man in the giant spirit gang, and naturally knew the strength of the giant spirit gang. For example, East Yan's Mortuary Manor, South Yan's Divine Martial Sect, and other sects, they all have a large area of influence, while the giant spirit gang's area of influence is at most Qi Shui County. After escaping from Qi Shui County, they were a lot more relaxed. Feng Yun couldn't help but ask Chen Hu at this time, Elder Chen, you and my father were not on good terms. Why are you taking such a big risk to save me now? Along the way, Chen Hu had been anxiously escaping with Feng Yun. The two sides rarely communicated. Now that they had just relaxed a little, Feng Yun couldn't wait to ask the doubts in his heart. Chen Hu sighed and said, Young master, I know that the leader must have said a lot of bad things about us old men in the past, but good words are unpleasant to the ear. We have been in the giant spirit gang for half of our lives. Do we want to see the giant spirit gang decline? We all want the giant spirit gang to develop better. The main contradiction between me and the leader is that the two sides have different ideas, so we often quarrel. In fact, I also want the leader to develop the giant spirit gang. But now, the leader has been killed by that traitor Shen Feiying and Chu Xiu, and the other Devil Path villains. They want to occupy the giant spirit gang. How can I sit back and do nothing? Even if I am willing to live, I am afraid that one day when I die, I will let down the old leader's kindness. Old Feng's temper is too stubborn, and in public with Chu Xiu, he was killed by Chu Xiu. I can only temporarily disguise myself, so that I can save the young master. Feng Yun nodded with red eyes. He really misunderstood Chen Hu before. When Chen Hu brought people to search his house, he really thought that Chen Hu brought people to kill him. Then Elder Chen, what should we do now? Feng Yun was slightly flustered. Under the protection of Feng Datong, he had never come into contact with the dangers of the Jianghu, so he did not know how to deal with this kind of situation. Chen Hu said in a low voice, Don't worry, Shen Feiying's position is not right. There are many people in the giant spirit gang who are not convinced by him. Feng Yun said with a sad face, But the person behind Shen Feiying is Chu Xiu. The Chu Xiu who single-handedly fought against the Eastern Qi Northern Yen alliance of the righteous sects. Chen Hu said coldly. So what if he is Chu Xiu? Even if he has the background of the Yinma clan, even if he is in cahoots with the Northern Yen imperial court, this world is not a place where they can distort the truth. The gang leader still has some connections in the Jianghu. We can ask them for help. It would be best if we can use their connections to contact the Northern Floating Snow City or the Huangfu clan. It would be best if we can contact the Great Light Temple. Let the experts of these sects stand up for the Giant Spirit Gang. We will definitely be able to take back the Giant Spirit Gang from the hands of Chu Xiu. At this moment, a voice suddenly came. Chen Hu, you are thinking too much. Do you really think that you will be safe once you leave Qi River Commandery? Ridiculous. More than 10 martial artists flanked them from the surrounding alleys, directly surrounding the two of them. The leader was a martial artist in the unity of heaven and man realm with a small mustache. He was not an elder of the Giant Spirit Gang, but a branch leader of the Giant Spirit Gang. After Shen Feiying took over the Giant Spirit Gang, he immediately chose to side with him. Chen Hu shouted angrily. Zhou Tianyi, you were personally promoted by the gang leader to be a branch leader, but now you choose to side with a traitor, not even letting his last son go. Are you worthy of the gang leader's promotion and training? Zhou Tianyi snorted coldly. A fine bird chooses a tree to nest in. When Feng Datong was the gang leader, what development did the Giant Spirit Gang have? Now that Shen Feiying has succeeded, and with the help of Zhenwu Hall's Sir Chu Xiu, the time for the Giant Spirit Gang to soar into the sky is right in front of us. It's fine if you don't understand the current situation, but you are actually holding us back in the dark. It's simply despicable. Attack together, don't let Feng Yun escape. As soon as the voice fell, Zhou Tianyi and the others immediately rushed forward. They did not hold back at all. Chu Xiu let these people put on a show, but this show could not be too fake. Therefore, these people at the bottom of the Giant Spirit Gang did not know the truth of the matter, so they were prepared to kill every time. Chapter 679. The Jianghu is dangerous and unpredictable. For the first time, Feng Yun understood the meaning of this sentence. In the past, when Feng Datong was still around, Zhou Tianyi bowed to Feng Datong and was willing to go through fire and water for the gang leader. He was also very polite to the young gang leader, and even often sent gifts to curry favor. Chen Hu was the stubborn old man that his father often scolded. But now the old man who had been scolded by his father had risked his life to save him, and Zhou Tianyi, who used to bow and scrape to him and his father, had changed his attitude and wanted to kill him. This kind of change made Feng Yun feel helpless and sad. During the battle, Chen Hu had been protecting Feng Yun behind him. After a fierce battle, after killing several people, he brought Feng Yun out of the encirclement. Although they were both in the unity of heaven and man realm, Zhou Tianyi's strength could only be said to be ordinary. He had not broken through to the unity of heaven and man realm for long. Chen Hu, on the other hand, was an elder of the Giant Spirit Gang. He was 1 generation older than Zhou Tianyi, so he had access to more martial arts than Zhou Tianyi. His qi and blood hadn't yet reached the point where they were on the verge of collapse, so after a fierce battle, Zhou Tianyi was unexpectedly injured by Chen Hu, allowing Chen Hu to lead his people out of the encirclement. Covering his chest where his qi and blood were boiling, Zhou Tianyi said coldly, I didn't expect this old man to be so strong. Just as Zhou Tianyi was about to lead his people to chase, Shen Feiying, Tang Ya, and Zhao Qingping suddenly appeared with their people. Zhou Tianyi was shocked and quickly said, Greetings, gang leader, Lord Tang, and Lord Zhao. At this time, Zhou Tianyi was also puzzled. These people were not far away. Why did they not attack? Shen Feiying waved his hand and said, Okay, there is no need for you to do anything else. You can go. Hearing Shen Feiying said this, although Zhou Tianyi was puzzled, he could only say, Yes, subordinate obeys. After Zhou Tianyi left, Shen Feiying asked Tang Ya and Zhao Qingping, You two, should we pursue a little more closely now? Once they leave the Qi Water County, they won't be under the influence of my Giant Spirit Gang. I'm afraid it won't be easy to find them. Tang Ya said lazily, Don't worry, don't forget who my lord is now. He is the governor of the Zhenwu Hall, a member of the imperial court. He has the power to cooperate with other people of the Northern Yen court. As long as these two people are still in the Northern Yen territory, they will not be able to escape. We need to lure the snake out of its hole. We haven't seen the shadow of the snake yet, so we can't be anxious. At that moment, on Chen Hu's side, after breaking out of the encirclement, he had actually suffered some light injuries, but they were not serious. At this time, the Chen of the mountain of Chen of the Eastern Yan dynasty, Chen of he, Chen of house, Chen of Tian Shan, he of Tian, Ping. Although if Chen of Yun, Chen of Master Chen, the Yan Chen of the Yun clan of Yan, the clan he and of Xian Yun, he and he Fong of Yun in and a Fong of Fong Yang was he. Even if you became a martial Dao master, if you did not have enough reputation and accumulation, you would not be able to become a top force in Jianghu. However, a force with a martial Dao master and a force without a martial Dao master were two different levels. Feng Datong was in contact with Shen Zhongping when he was alive. Some of the Shen family's business was also transported through the giant spirit gang's business route. Therefore, Chen Hu immediately went to Ping. At this moment, in the Shen family manor, Shen Zhongping was dressed in luxurious clothes and had a square appearance. Listening to Chen Hu's description and Feng Yun's pitiful appearance, his square and peaceful appearance was gradually distorted by anger. Too much. This is too much. Chu Xiao is so arrogant, and Shen Feiying is a shameless person who betrayed his brother for power. Brother Feng's death is really unjust. Shen Zhongping was indeed a very kind person, and he also had a sense of justice in his heart. Therefore, at this time, he was also very angry at Chu Xiao's ruthless methods and Shen Feiying's shameless behavior. Chen Hu sighed helplessly and said, Chu Xiao was originally a ferocious devil in Jianghu. The evil killing alliance failed to kill him, and instead, they were killed by him. Now that sect master has fallen to such a state, it is also karma of the past. However, Chu Xiao colluded with that traitor Shen Feiying to seize our giant spirit gang. This is something that I cannot tolerate. I risked my life to bring young sect master out. I hope that Lord Shen can save our lives on account of our past friendship. Shen Zhongping waved his hand and said, Don't worry. Not to mention that Brother Feng and I are good friends. Even if he was a stranger, I would not sit by and watch Chu Xiao and the others act so unscrupulously in our northern Yan martial world. You can stay here for a while. I have some friendship with Huangfu Weiming of the Huangfu clan. When the time comes, I will go to the Huangfu clan to seek justice. Shen Zhongping also knew that to deal with a devil like Chu Xiao, righteousness alone was useless. He also needed strength. His strength was definitely not enough, but as one of the 9 great families, the Huangfu clan could. After Chen Hu and the others left, the rest of the Shen family quickly stood up and persuaded, Master, you can't take them in. It's not like you don't know Chu Xiao's reputation. He was originally a member of the Diabolism. He was cruel and merciless. Now, he colluded with the imperial court to establish the Zhenwu Hall. It was clear that he was targeting the martial arts forces of Northern Yan Kingdom. In this situation, we can't even avoid it. How can you bring trouble to our family? Shen Zhongping frowned and said, How can you think like this? Today, the giant spirit gang is in trouble. I don't care, he doesn't care, and no one can sit idly by. When our Shen family is in trouble, won't it be the same? If the righteous martial world is filled with people who are greedy for life and afraid of death, what kind of righteous martial world is it? All the Chen family martial artists present had a helpless look on their faces. Their master was actually good in every aspect. He had strength and potential and he was kind. He handled the family affairs fairly. But this was not good. He was somewhat stubborn. It was fine if he was stubborn in other aspects, but at this time, he was still stubborn. This could easily bring the entire Shen family into a crisis. Everyone wanted to persuade him again, but Shen Zhongping directly waved his hand and said, You don't have to say any more. I have made up my mind. If I don't care about this matter, not only will I let down Brother Feng, but I will also let down my conscience. At this moment, there were suddenly a few angry shouts from the Shen family's disciples outside the door, but then the door was directly blasted open. Several Shen family's disciples vomited blood and flew away. A group of warriors in black went straight into the hall. It was Tangya and the others. With a smile on his face, Tangya clapped his hands and said, Well said, Manor Master Shen. This awareness is high. But I also have a question that I want to ask Manor Master Shen. In the end, is life more important or conscience more important? Shen Zhongping stood up and shouted, Who are you? He had a faint guess in his heart, but he did not dare to say it. He had just taken in Feng Yun. How did they come so quickly?
Tanya said faintly. Under the command of Zhenwu Hall, under the order of official Chu, to search for the remnants of the rebel party.
Manor Master Shen, please hand over the person. Shen Zhongping's body trembled and he said angrily, Nonsense! When did the giant spirit gang become a rebel party? Tanya said with a serious face. It was just done. Shen Zhongping pointed at Tanya, and he was trembling with anger. He had seen arrogant people, but he had never seen such arrogant people. This was simply turning black and white upside down. Tanya said in a deep voice, Official Chu is still waiting for the news. We don't have time to waste. Manor Master Shen, I only ask you one question. Are you going to hand over this person or not?
I know that Manor Master Shen is a good person, so I will give you 10 seconds to consider whether your conscience or your life is more important.
As he said, Tanya began to stretch out his fingers and counted, 1, 2. On the opposite side, Shen Zhongping's head was full of cold sweat, and his eyes flashed with a tangled color. He was no longer as firm as before. Now those who came were just the lackeys under Chu Xiao, and their own strength was not that strong. But if he waited for Chu Xiao to come in person, he was afraid that he would not even have the chance to speak. It was said that in the giant spirit gang, Chu Xiao killed Feng Datong in 2 moves. A martial Dao master who was somewhat famous in the northern Yan land was as powerless as a baby in the hands of Chu Xiao. Just when Shen Zhongping was still tangled, Tanya suddenly increased the speed of his count. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 9. Well, it seems that Manor Master Shen has made up his mind. Well then, let's do it. Shen Zhongping was stunned, but before he could say anything, a figure directly rushed out from beside Tanya, holding a heavy sword. The sword slashed down with monstrous momentum and was incomparably violent. The huge sword actually made him feel like he was using a heavy hammer. This person was Yen Bugui. Zhao Chengping and the others stood beside Tanya, but they did not make a move.
They were martial artists from the Yinma clan, and their strength was actually a level higher than Tanya and the others.
However, Tanya and the others were Chu Xiao's trusted subordinates, and they were old people who had followed Chu Xiao from the very beginning. So even if Tanya and the others were not as strong as them, they did not want to offend Tanya and the others. At least before their position under Chu Xiao was stabilized, they would not offend Tanya and the others. Yen Bugui was currently only at the peak of the 5 Qis collecting the elements, and he was slightly weaker than Shen Zhongping. But when facing Shen Zhongping, Yen Bugui's momentum was stronger than his, and even Shen Zhongping could feel a faint sense of pressure. Shen Zhongping roared and slashed out with his sword. The sword qi was surrounded by strong winds, but under Yen Bugui's sword, they were all smashed to pieces. Another sword fell, and Shen Zhongping was directly forced back 3 steps. He was already at a disadvantage. The third sword fell, and the long sword in Shen Zhongping's hand was completely shattered. The fourth sword fell, and Yen Bugui had already forced Shen Zhongping to burn his qi and blood to resist. The fifth sword fell, and the powerful force poured into Shen Zhongping's body, causing his body to directly explode, and instantly become a pile of minced meat. Using the 5 Qis collecting the elements to kill the unity of man and heaven, Yen Bugui only used 5 swords. In the eyes of others, there was not the slightest difference between his 5 swords. Zhao Chengping and the others were finally convinced, and they finally understood why official Chu valued these 2 so much. They had not seen Tanya's strength, but Yen Bugui's potential was really amazing. At least when they were at the 5 Qis collecting the elements, they could not be as fierce as Yen Bugui. Chapter 680. 5 swords slashed a warrior at the unity of man and nature realm into a pile of minced meat. It could be said to be extremely fierce. Many disciples of the Shen family kept quiet out of fear. Tanya smiled and said, "Everyone, my Zhenwu Hall has never forced anyone. Although your Shen family harbored a rebel, Shen Zhongping has already been executed, so I will give you another chance." As Tanya said, he took out the Zhenwu Hall agreement and handed it to everyone in the Shen family. This is the agreement drafted by Sir Chu Xiao of the Zhenwu Hall. After signing it, you will be considered as people of the Zhenwu Hall. Of course, I also know that you must be thinking that our righteous sects will definitely not cooperate with the evil sects, right? It doesn't matter. I have said that my Zhenwu Hall has never forced others, so I will give you 10 seconds to think about it. Listen carefully 1, 2. Hearing that Tanya began to count again, everyone in the Shen family was going crazy. Shen Zhongping's minced meat was still on the ground. They didn't know whether Tanya really didn't know how to count or he did it deliberately. So after Tanya just spat out 2 words, an elder of the Shen family shouted, "Stop counting. I will sign. I will sign. My Shen family is willing to surrender to official Chu. From now on, we will follow the lead of the Zhanwu Hall." The other Shen family people still wanted to refute, but when they heard him speak, they were all relieved. The pressure just now was too great. It was so great that they couldn't bear it. Shen Zhongping had righteousness in his heart. His bones were hard, but it didn't mean that other people's bones were also hard. In fact, what Tanya didn't know was that Shen Zhongping's bones were actually not as hard as he thought. At that time, Shen Zhongping was already hesitant. Maybe if he was given a little more time, Shen Zhongping would compromise. Tanya smiled and said, "It seems that except for Manor Master Shen, the rest of your Shen family is quite tactful. But now your Shen family is a group of dragons without a leader, so you can't just sign one person's name. Everyone here, please sign your name." Everyone present had no choice but to sign the agreement one by one. But as they wrote, they felt that something was wrong. Didn't the people of the Zhanwu Hall want to eliminate the roots of Feng Datong's children? Why are they only targeting me and not Feng Yun and the others? Although everyone was puzzled, no one dared to pursue the matter. After the agreement was signed, Tanya waved his hand and said, "Go, continue to chase. Don't let that kid Feng Yun escape." The people of the Shen family looked at each other. Why did they only think of chasing at this time? In the time that Tanya and the others delayed, Chen Hu had already escaped with Feng Yun. After arriving at the Shen family village, they thought that they could breathe a sigh of relief. They didn't expect the opposite party to be in hot pursuit. Moreover, it wasn't just the people from the giant spirit gang, but also the people from the Zhanwu Hall.
"Elder Chen, what should we do now?"
Feng Yun asked with a look of horror. He was really panicking. He thought that he had already escaped, but he didn't expect that there was still a greater danger behind him. Chen Hu gritted his teeth and said, "Don't worry, young gang leader. The connections that gang leader left behind in the past are not limited to the Shen family." As he said, Chen Hu immediately took Feng Yun on the road again to seek help from other forces. But this time they were not so lucky. Han Feng, the leader of the Thousand Sabers sect in Eastern Yen, was also a good friend of Feng Datong. The weapons of the Thousand Sabers sect were bought from the Magic Weapon Pavilion in Eastern Qi through the trade route of the Giant Spirit Gang. As a result, when Chen Hu came to the door, he didn't even see Han Feng's face. He was directly blocked by a disciple. Chen Hu frowned and said, "What do you mean? Why don't you let me see sect leader Han?" The disciple said faintly, "Sorry, the sect leader is not here." "Then I want to see the deputy sect leader." The disciple didn't even hesitate and said, "The deputy sect leader is not here either." Chen Hu said angrily, "The Thousand Sabers sect is so big, but the sect leader and the deputy sect leader are not here. There isn't even a steward. Do you think I'm an idiot?" The disciple sneered and said, "Elder Chen, it's not that I think you're an idiot, but I'm afraid you think my Thousand Sabers sect is an idiot now? Don't you know what's going on with your giant spirit gang? Previously, you all went to the Shen family manor. In the end, the Shen family manor was found by the Suppression Martial Hall's people, and Shen Zhongping was directly killed. Sorry, my Thousand Sabers sect didn't participate in any fiend extermination alliance back then, and we don't want to court death. I don't care where the two of you want to go, but please don't implicate our Thousand Sabers sect." After saying that, the disciple directly closed the door, leaving behind the furious Chen Hu and Feng Yun. Chen Hu scolded angrily, "Ungrateful! Your Thousand Sabers sect defended several large clans in East Swallow in the past, and they joined forces to attack your sect. If not for the sect leader coming forward to help mediate, your Thousand Sabers sect would have long been annihilated." Although Chen Hu was cursing here, the Thousand Sabers sect remained unmoved. Helpless, Chen Hu could only turn around and leave. At this time, inside the Thousand Sabers sect, sect leader Han Feng was drinking tea with a group of Thousand Sabers sect elders, with a leisurely attitude. Chen Hu scolded him for being ungrateful, but Han Feng didn't care about this at all. Feng Datong did help him, but in the pugilistic world, it was normal to owe each other favors. Fong Datong helping him was just a matter of lifting a hand. If it was an ordinary small matter, Han Feng didn't mind helping and returning the favor. However, this was a life-threatening matter. Han Feng didn't want to lose his life inexplicably like Shen Zhongping.
At this moment, a disciple suddenly came in to report, "Sect leader, there are people outside who claim to be from the suppression hall, and they want to see sect leader."
Han Feng and the others looked at each other. They had already rejected Chen Hu and Feng Yun outside the door. Didn't they know? Han Feng coughed and said, "Don't panic, we didn't take in those two people. What are you afraid of? Invite them in." After a while, Tangya walked in with his men and said with a smile, "Greetings, sect leader Han."
Han Feng also quickly stood up and said with cupped hands, "Sirs from the suppression hall are too polite.
I know you want to pursue Chen Hu and Feng Yun, so I didn't take them in. They just left not long ago. If the sirs want to chase after them, it's actually not too late." Tangya said with a smile, "There's no hurry. We actually want to find you, sect leader Han."
Han Feng had a bad feeling in his heart. "Why are you looking for me?"
Tangya took out the suppression hall agreement and threw it to Han Feng. "Sect leader Han, sign it. There are benefits."
Han Feng glanced at the contents of the agreement and almost vomited blood.
He clearly didn't take in Chen Hu and Feng Yun. Why did trouble still come to him?
After holding it in for a long time, Han Feng finally said, "You didn't follow the rules."
Tangya nodded naturally and said, "You're right. We didn't follow the rules." Hearing this, Han Feng almost fell out with Tangya on the spot.
However, before he could say anything, Tangya said directly, "Sect leader Han, I know what you want to say.
It's nothing more than a threat.
Once we make a big deal and anger the Northern Yen martial arts world, we will be attacked by a group of people, right?
What you said may be right, but what does it have to do with you if we are attacked by a group of people? If you don't sign it, my suppression hall will destroy the Thousand Knives sect. As for the future of my suppression hall, you don't have to worry about it. These two things have nothing to do with each other, right?" Tangya's words made Han Feng speechless for a while. It seemed that there was nothing wrong with it, right? Zhao Chengping on the side looked at Tangya. This person had been with Sir Chu Xiu for a long time. His ability to distort black and white was 80% the true legacy of official Chu. Although Han Feng's face was red with anger, he finally signed the agreement in humiliation. Han Feng was not a stubborn person. Otherwise, he would not have gone too far with Chen Hu and Feng Yun just now. At this time, under the threat of life and death, he could only choose to yield.
Tangya smiled and said, "Very well, a wise man submits to circumstances.
Let's go and continue to chase Feng Yun."
Han Feng stood there with a gloomy expression.
At this time, he finally knew that all of this was Chu Xiu's calculation. Whether he took in Feng Yun or not, the result was the same. In fact, Chu Xiu's prediction was indeed right. His trick was almost certain to defeat all the forces that came to him. Feng Yun was like a touchstone. He tested the character of all the sects, or at least their rulers. Those who chose to take in Feng Yun and fight against Chu Xiu had some backbone. However, it was useless to have backbone alone. They would be killed by the suppression hall if they were caught. As for those who did not take in Feng Yun, they were naturally those who were greedy for life and afraid of death. When the suppression hall came to their door, they could be subdued with threats. Chu Xiu's method was very dirty. After several consecutive times, the martial arts forces around the East Yen finally recovered. This Chu Xiu was clearly playing with them. But even so, there was no other way since he was stronger than the other party. Therefore, in the face of the situation again, those forces would either go to the big forces they were familiar with for help, or they would really take the elites of their sects or families to temporarily hide. They could not afford to provoke, but couldn't they hide? Therefore, in this case, Tangya and the others had no chance to make a move. Seeing that his plan seemed to have no effect, Chu Xiu was too lazy to act anymore. He directly ordered Shen Feiying, Tangya, and the others to pursue Chen Hu and Feng Yun with all their strength. At this time, in a broken temple on a small road in the East Yen, Chen Hu and Feng Yun were already very miserable. They were dressed like beggars. During this period of time, they were on the run almost every day. They could not care about anything else. Moreover, Chen Hu and Feng Yun were not idiots. They could feel several times in a row that the pursuers could clearly catch up with them, but they did not appear in front of them in the end. Coupled with the news from the underworld, Chen Hu and Fang Yun knew that they were being used by Chu Xiao. Those sects that did not take them in were fine, but for those sects that took them in, they were accomplices. At this moment, there were footsteps around, but Chen Hu and Fang Yun did not even have the mood to resist. Their remaining value had been squeezed dry, and the matter was finally over. Chapter 681. Tang Ya, Shen Feiying, and the rest had completely surrounded the dilapidated temple. Looking at Fang Yun in the dilapidated temple, Shen Feiying felt a little emotional. Fang Yun had called him godfather since he was born, and he had called him that for 20 years. Now, he had to kill him personally. Shen Feiying did not regret betraying Fang Datong. However, facing Fang Yun, Fang Datong really felt a little guilty. However, no matter how guilty he felt, Shen Feiying knew that killing Fang Yun would affect his future. Now that he had killed his elder brother and colluded with the suppression hall to seize the giant spirit gang, he could no longer turn back. Pushing open the door of the dilapidated temple, Shen Feiying said coldly, "Chen Hu, I didn't realize it before, but your acting skills are pretty good." Chen Hu's face showed a trace of sadness. "What's the use of acting skills? In the end, I was still fooled by you and became a tool to suppress the Northern Yen martial arts. I, Chen Hu, have not let down the giant spirit gang, but I have let down the entire Northern Yen martial arts community." Shen Feiying sneered. Tang Ya said faintly, "Who can you blame for your own stupidity?" Hearing this, Chen Hu's blood rushed to his heart and he actually spat out a mouthful of blood. Tang Ya raised his eyebrows and said, "Yo, so petty. TSK, with this kind of mind, you still want to learn how to act? Gang leader Shen, this is the internal affairs of the giant spirit gang. I won't interfere." Shen Feiying looked at Fang Yun and sighed. "Fang Yun, don't blame me. If you want to blame someone, you can only blame yourself for being Fang Datong's son. If you want to blame someone, you can only blame Chen Hu for taking you away. If you had obediently stayed in the giant spirit gang, I would have spared your life. But now I have no choice." Fang Yun gritted his teeth and looked at Shen Feiying. He said hatefully, "Don't pretend to be benevolent. Shen Feiying, I will not let you go even if I become a ghost." Shen Feiying shook his head. His palm exploded with earth energy and directly struck at Fang Yun. However, right at that moment, a gentle breeze blew past, completely negating the power of Shen Feiying's palm strike. Moreover, it even caused him to take a few steps back. However, he did not suffer any injuries. An old Taoist wearing a grayish-white Taoist robe with a sword on his back and a horsetail whisk in his right hand was already standing in front of Fang Yun and the others. He sighed and said, "Everyone, you have killed so many people and forced so many forces to surrender to the Zhenwu Hall. You should be satisfied, right? It's time to stop." Seeing this old Taoist priest, Chen Hu's eyes immediately lit up, and he said in pleasant surprise, "It's Taoist priest Floating Cloud. Many thanks for saving me, Taoist Floating Cloud." The old Taoist was not famous in the outside world, but he was famous in the Northern Yen martial arts world. The biggest reason was that he was a martial arts grandmaster who was a rogue cultivator. The second reason was that he was a Taoist. Among the sects in the world, the power of the Northern Yen Taoism was actually not great. Of the 3 major Taoism sects, 2 were in Eastern Qi, and 1 was in Western Chu. As for the 2 major Buddhist sects, 1 was in southern China, and the other was in Northern Yen. Although the bitter and cold land of the extreme north was not considered as the territory of Northern Yen, it was next to Northern Yen. There was no country there, so it was considered as the land of Northern Yen. Therefore, in this way, the general understanding of the martial arts world was that the Eastern Qi Taoism sects were powerful, while the Northern Yen Buddhism was flourishing. It was not easy for this Taoist priest Floating Cloud to become a Taoism grandmaster in Northern Yen Taoism. Moreover, this Taoist priest Floating Cloud had a good reputation. He had almost no enemies, and his conduct was like his Taoist name. He was an idle floating cloud. He never incurred enmity, nor did he take the initiative to meddle in other people's business. He would only intervene when the matter was right in front of him. Fang Datong did not have much interaction with this Taoist priest Floating Cloud, an expert Taoist priest Floating Cloud. Therefore, Fang Datong had never thought of seeking this person's help. Who would have thought that this time, the other party would make an exception and take the initiative to help?
Shen Feiying squinted his eyes and said with horror, Taoist priest floating cloud, you have always been an idle cloud and a wild crane. It is not your style to intervene in this kind of matter. Taoist priest floating cloud smiled bitterly and shook his head. So many people have come to my sect. I'm afraid I can't be an idle cloud and a wild crane. I said that you have killed enough people. The conduct of the Zhenwu Hall is awe-inspiring and domineering enough. Shouldn't you stop? This way, it will be convenient for you and me. Isn't this good? Taoist priest floating cloud was really not a person who liked to meddle in other people's business. In the past, when he was in the demon-killing alliance, Nie Renlong had even personally opened his mouth to invite him, but he had still refused. Therefore, he stood up now not simply to meddle in other people's business, but because he was annoyed by those people's words. Moreover, Chu Xiu's actions this time were a bit too big. Even Taoist priest floating cloud, who was like an idle cloud and a wild crane, felt threatened. If Chu Xiu really wanted to stir up the entire northern Yen martial arts world, could he continue to be so unfettered? Therefore, no matter what, he had to make a trip here. Tanya stood up and said with a smile, Taoist priest floating cloud, right? You are a senior in Jianghu. Since you have stood up, we have to give you face. How about this? We were originally prepared to kill 2 people. Now, killing 1 is enough. It will be up to the 2 of them to decide who lives and who dies. How about it? Is it enough to give you face? Hearing this, Taoist priest floating cloud immediately shook his head and said helplessly, Chen Hu and Fang Yun have both gone through hardships. Don't use this kind of scheme to play with people's hearts. Everyone, you should all retreat. With me here, you won't be able to kill them. Go back and tell your official Chu to stop. If by any chance those monks from the Temple of Great Light are drawn out, then this matter will be completely blown up. At this moment, Yen Bugui, who was beside Tanya, actually rushed out with his heavy sword in hand and slashed down at Taoist priest floating cloud. Tanya's expression suddenly changed. He wanted to pull him back, but he couldn't. This caused him to involuntarily curse Yen Bugui in his heart for going crazy again. He had known Yen Bugui for such a long time, so he understood his strength better than anyone else. With Yen Bugui's current strength, it wouldn't be a problem for him to kill some ordinary unity of heaven and man realm martial artists. However, the problem was that his current opponent was a martial arts grandmaster. This guy also had to look at his opponent before going crazy. They had known each other for so many years. Although Yen Bugui's character was somewhat eccentric, he was still considered a good friend of Tang Ya's. Tang Ya naturally couldn't just watch Yen Bugui throw away his life like this. Therefore, the moment Yen Bugui made his move, a flying knife in Tang Ya's hand also slashed out. Although it was launched later, it arrived first. With a whistling knife aura, it instantly arrived in front of Taoist priest floating cloud. Seeing that Tang Ya and Yen Bugui had already made their move, Zhao Qingping also gritted his teeth and charged at Taoist priest floating cloud with his long spear. Behind him, Luo Sansong also slashed down with her knife. Although they didn't have a deep friendship with Tang Ya and Yen Bugui, they were currently working under Chu Xiu, so they naturally couldn't just watch Tang Ya and the others throw away their lives like this. Only Shen Feiying didn't move. Facing a martial arts grandmaster, these guys even dared to make a move. Had they lost their minds? Even if Shen Feiying wanted to put on a good performance, he still didn't have the courage to make a move against a martial arts grandmaster. Taoist priest floating cloud sighed and swung the horsetail whisk in his hand. A majestic astral energy swept out like a vast river, its momentum astonishing. Moreover, this majestic astral energy also contained a mellow aura. As it surged, it instantly wore down their attacks. Tang Ya's flying knife fell to the ground, Yen Bugui was sent flying along with his sword, and Zhao Chengping and Luo Sansong were also repelled. Fortunately, Taoist priest floating cloud didn't have any murderous intent. Otherwise, they would all have ended up with serious injuries. Swinging his horsetail whisk, Taoist priest floating cloud said in a deep voice, "Everyone, I don't want to make a big deal out of this. I'll say it again, if you all retreat, this matter will be considered settled." At this time, a cold voice said, "Taoist priest floating cloud, you've cultivated for so many years, do you know what the secret to longevity is? Then mind your own business. You've been living like a wild crane and drifting clouds for so many years, and now you've broken through your cultivation. Is it worth it?"
Following the sound of that voice, Chu Xiu's figure stepped into the dilapidated temple. In an instant, a powerful demonic energy lingered in the entire dilapidated temple. The atmosphere was oppressive and stagnant, as if it could drip water. The complexions of Tang Ya and the others didn't change at all, because they knew that Chu Xiu would definitely be following behind them. On the other hand, Fang Yun and Chen, whose faces revealed extreme hatred. Chu Xiu. He was the main culprit that caused the entire giant spirit gang to change. Without Chu Xiu, just relying on Shen Feiying alone, even if he had second thoughts, he still wouldn't have been able to do anything to Fang Datong. As long as Shen Feiying hadn't reached the martial Dao Grandmaster realm, he could only bow his head in front of Fang Datong. Taoist priest Floating Cloud looked at Chu Xiu, his face also revealing a solemn expression, no longer as relaxed as before. When facing Tang Ya and the others, Taoist priest Floating Cloud could still put on the posture of a senior expert. But when facing Chu Xiu at this time, under that extremely strong pressure and dignified aura, Taoist priest Floating Cloud didn't dare to relax even a little bit. He hadn't dealt with Chu Xiu before, but coincidentally, among those people Chu Xiu had killed, he had dealt with many of them. For example, Nie Renlong, Fang Datong, and Chunyang Dao Sex Zhanyangzi. These people all died at the hands of Chu Xiu. One could imagine how terrifying this young man was, and how powerful his demonic might was. Taoist priest Floating Cloud sighed. Official Chu, Fang Datong participated in the demon-killing alliance in the past and was killed by you. This is karma. But the people you killed along the way and the sects you forced to submit are not few. Is it not enough now? Chu Xiu stood with his hands behind his back and said indifferently, Taoist priest, do you want to stand up for them? Just now you had my subordinates withdraw. They weren't a match for you, so I'm here now. I'll also give you a choice. Hand over Chan Hu and Fang Yun and retreat, and I'll agree to stop. If not, then we'll fight. My martial subduing hall will continue to suppress the Northern Yen martial arts world. When the time comes, more people will die. Taoist priest Floating Cloud, whether 2 people die or a group of people die, I'll let you choose. Taoist priest Floating Cloud's complexion suddenly changed. He was a person who was unwilling to kill the innocent. He couldn't be considered a good person, but he was definitely a good person. In the end, how should he choose between the lives of 2 people and the lives of a group of people? Should he sacrifice Chen Hu and Fang Yun to save the others? Would that be fair to these 2 people? If he didn't choose this question well, it would affect his state of mind. Chapter 682. Chu Xiu looked at Taoist Floating Cloud indifferently. He wanted to see how this Taoist priest would choose. In fact, this kind of question was easy to choose for both true villains and hypocrites. For true villains, they would choose the side that would benefit them the most. If they only wanted to use Fang Yu's identity to stir up trouble, then they could completely disregard the lives and interests of the entire Northern Yen martial world. If this question was asked by a hypocrite, then the other party would certainly make an awkward expression and choose to sacrifice Fang Yu and Chen Hu to save the majority and obtain reputation. Unfortunately, Taoist Floating Cloud wasn't a true villain, nor was he a hypocrite. He was indeed a good person, so the feeling of having people's lives in his hands was not pleasant and made him feel very conflicted. After a long while, Taoist Floating Cloud exhaled and said, The lives of 2 people are lives, and the lives of a group of people are also lives. This question of official Chu has stumped this poor Taoist, so this poor Taoist can only choose neither. Since this poor Taoist has already taken care of this matter, then I can only take care of it to the end. Chu Xiu smiled and said, Taoist Floating Cloud is really responsible. Very well then, I'll fulfill your wish, Taoist. As his voice fell, Chu Xiu's heavenly demon dance was already in his hand at some point. With a slash, his hatred and demonic aura instantly soared to the sky, and his demonic might covered the sky. Since stepping into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm, this was actually the first time Chu Xiu had used his full strength. The last time Fang Yu had attacked, Chu Xiu hadn't even used half of his strength. Now, Chu Xiu looked like he was going all out. Chu Xiu didn't know Taoist Floating Cloud's strength for the time being, but he had heard of this person. Although Taoist Floating Cloud was a rogue cultivator, his inheritance was orthodox and couldn't be underestimated. Moreover, he had also stepped into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm for more than 10 years, so his accumulation was unusually deep. Behind Chu Xiu,
Tang Ya and the others also looked at Chu Xiao with shock. They knew that after official Chu stepped into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm, his strength would definitely usher in a qualitative leap, but they did not expect Chu Xiao's power to be so strong. Daoist Floating Cloud brandished the long sword in his hand, and in an instant, his astral energy swept over like a flowing cloud. It met Chu Xiao's blade and made a sharp turn. Upon closer inspection, that astral energy didn't seem to have any attribute, but it contained the power of yin and yang. It constantly wore down the power of Chu Xiao's blade. With a loud bang, the devil chi scattered in all directions. Daoist Floating Cloud took a step back, a grave expression on his face. Daoist Floating Cloud had cultivated martial Dao for more than 100 years, but the result was that he still wasn't as strong as a 20-year-old youngster's strength and foundation. This was no small blow to Daoist Floating Cloud. Chu Xiao was able to make a name for himself in Jianghu as a member of the Yinma clan, and he even survived the joint attack of the righteous Wulin. He was really not easy to get along with. Therefore, after exchanging a blow, the horsetail whisk in Daoist Floating Cloud's hand curled up, and a gentle astral energy swept towards Chan Hu and Feng Yun. He hadn't come to find Chu Xiao to decide victory or defeat, but to save someone. As long as the person didn't die, everything was fine. The corner of Chu Xiao's mouth revealed the trace of a sneer. To tell the truth, even if Daoist Floating Cloud hadn't appeared to meddle in other people's business this time, Chu Xiao would still have looked for a weighty target. His plan for the entire northern Yen world of martial arts was from the bottom to the top. Now that a small and weak sect like the Shenjia village had already surrendered to him, he had to look for a weighty target to establish his might. Daoist Floating Cloud just happened to bump into the muzzle of his spear. How could he let him leave like this? Therefore, Chan Hu wasn't important now, and neither was Feng Yun. Daoist Floating Cloud was the most important person. Chu Xiao withdrew his saber and formed a seal, displaying the colorless fixed palm mudra. Sumeru like a mustard seed. Heaven and earth reverse. Under the mudra, all power was melted away, and the formidable Buddhist light extinguished everything, causing Daoist Floating Cloud to gnash his teeth in hatred. Daoist Floating Cloud and Buddhism couldn't coexist. He hadn't been this angry when Chu Xiao had displayed his demonic arts, but now Chu Xiao had used a Buddhist cultivation technique to repel him. This made Daoist Floating Cloud very unhappy. Just as Daoist Floating Cloud was preparing to make a move, Chu Xiao's whole body blossomed with a golden primordial spirit, and the soul-extinguishing arrow was unleashed. Demonic energy fused into the soul-extinguishing arrow, and it swiftly shot towards Daoist Floating Cloud with a silent whistle. Moreover, this wasn't the end. Chu Xiao had unexpectedly shot 3 soul-extinguishing arrows in a row. The 3 primordial spirit arrows tightly locked onto Daoist Floating Cloud, immediately causing alarm bells to ring in his mind. Previously, Chu Xiao hadn't been able to extravagantly use a martial technique like the soul-extinguishing arrow that consumed a great deal of mental power. But now that he'd shot 3 arrows in a row, it didn't have much of an effect on Chu Xiao. Daoist Floating Cloud didn't excel in mental power. The horsetail whisk in his hand swept out, and in an instant, the 2 energies of yin and yang circulated for hundreds of meters. A clear and turbid power erupted with a rumble, wrapping his entire body within. The soul-extinguishing arrow shot into the power of yin and yang. It was obviously formless mental power, but it was strangled to death by the tangible power of yin and yang. The power of yin and yang was the most primitive power between heaven and earth, and the orthodox Taoism cultivated this power. Daoist Floating Cloud being able to cultivate to this stage as a rogue cultivator had a lot to do with his orthodox Taoism background. But at this time, Chu Xiao took a step forward, and the sun, moon, and stars rotated in his eyes. In an instant, Daoist Floating Cloud felt as if everything around him had come to a standstill. The power of the laws was unceasingly decomposed in Chu Xiao's eyes. The Son of Heaven's gaze, the circulation of the 2 energies of yin and yang, had nowhere to hide in Chu Xiao's eyes. In an instant, Daoist Floating Cloud's eyes revealed a trace of astonishment. Other people couldn't sense it, but Daoist Floating Cloud, a martial artist of orthodox Taoism background, could sense that what Chu Xiao was using was actually an orthodox Taoist technique. Chu Xiao was a dual cultivator of Buddhism and demonic Taoism. This was something many people knew. But he was unexpectedly also proficient in Taoism cultivation methods. This was something that very few people knew. Daoist Floating Cloud had urged the power of yin and yang to the extreme,
and the Taiji River diagram seemed to be able to accommodate heaven and earth. It was unexpectedly somewhat similar to the Sumeru power of Chu Xiu's colorless fixed grand handprint. But at this time, Chu Xiu merely extended a finger, and in an instant, death chi erupted. Heavenly punishment, earthly extermination, immortal murdering divine finger. The power of this finger was originally very strong. Moreover, under the effect of Chu Xiu's heaven sun gazing at air, the power of his finger just so happened to point at the point where the power of yin and yang combined. It was an exceptionally weak point. 1,000-kilometer dike would be destroyed by an ant's nest. The pitch-black death chi began to spread, and the power of yin and yang collapsed in a flash before finally shattering with a loud bang. Taoist floating cloud retreated several steps. The horsetail whisk in his hand had already been thoroughly torn apart. His complexion was pale, and his eyes revealed a look of astonishment. He'd already predicted that this young man, Chu Xiu, would be very strong, but now it seemed that the other's strength had simply surpassed his imagination. The heavenly demon dance was held in Chu Xiu's hand, and the demonic qi all over his body soared several dozen meters into the sky. With the support of the 9 heavens fiend golden body and the great guardian deity divine strength, Chu Xiu's fleshly body cultivation had already reached a valiant realm. A casual slash of his saber carried a heaven-shaking might. The saber fell, and Taoist floating cloud retreated once more. The second saber fell, and Taoist floating cloud's complexion turned pale. The hand that held the sword was trembling. The third saber fell, and the long sword in Taoist floating cloud's hand directly shattered. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and his expression was dispirited. After a series of offensive attacks, Taoist floating cloud had already fallen into defeat. But as far as Chu Xiu was concerned, defeating Taoist floating cloud didn't seem to be a difficult matter at all. In fact, this was indeed the case. Chu Xiu had risked his life to condense the eternal demon core. In the end, he'd accumulated such a formidable foundation of power and stepped into the martial Tao Grandmaster realm. If he was still inferior to Taoist floating cloud, then what was the point of wasting so much effort? Just as Chu Xiu was preparing to attack again, Fang Yun suddenly stepped forward from the side. He held a dagger in his hand and looked at Chu Xiu and Shen Feiying. He roared, "Enough people have died because of me, and I don't want to continue living. But the two of you will suffer retribution." As his voice fell, Fang Yun unexpectedly stabbed himself in the chest with the dagger, committing suicide on the spot. To tell the truth, neither Taoist floating cloud nor Chu Xiu had expected Fang Yun's choice. In Shen Feiying's words, Fang Yun was actually somewhat cowardly and naive. He didn't have any opinions of his own. Chen, who hadn't expected that this honest man would be forced into a corner, and actually choose to use such a violent method to confront Chu Xiu. He could also see that Taoist floating cloud couldn't save him. Since that was the case, why would he still implicate Taoist floating cloud? He might as well settle things on his own and save himself from being humiliated by Chu Xiu. Chen Hu sighed. He also clenched his teeth, shattered his own heart meridian, and followed Fang Yun. Taoist floating cloud stared blankly at this scene. He looked at Chu Xiu with an angry expression on his face and said, "Chu Xiu, your conduct is so extreme and ruthless, and you've committed the sin of killing so many innocent people. In the future, you will definitely suffer retribution." Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Oh, retribution? More than one person has said this to me, but aren't I still alive and well right now? I, Chu Xiu, don't believe in fate." Taoist floating cloud didn't speak any more nonsense with Chu Xiu. He coldly snorted, and the yin and yang qi swept out from his body. His speed erupted to the limit as he directly turned around and left. He'd come to save people. Now that they were already dead, what else could he save? Chu Xiu also didn't chase after him. His goal of establishing his might had been achieved, so it didn't matter whether Taoist floating cloud left or not. Of course, the fundamental reason was that if Chu Xiu wanted to stop Taoist floating cloud, he would probably have to expend some strength. Although Taoist floating cloud had just been bombarded by Chu Xiu to the point of vomiting blood, he actually still had some strength left over. If he fought with his life on the line, he still had the opportunity to escape. Tangya walked behind Chu Xiu and asked, "My lord, what do we do now?" Chu Xiu glanced at the corpse on the ground and said, "Take the corpse away. Henceforth, the giant spirit gang will no longer have anyone from Fang Datong's bloodline." All the forces that have signed the agreement with the subduing martial hall must act according to the rules of the subduing martial hall. As for the other forces, don't provoke them for the time being. I reckon that it won't be long before someone will come knocking on your door. The other sects had encouraged Taoist Floating Cloud to meddle in other people's business. Now that Taoist Floating Cloud had retreated in defeat, he reckoned that they wouldn't sit still and await death. If someone else appeared, that person's weight would certainly be heavier than Taoist Floating Cloud's. Chapter 683. Inside the Floating Cloud Temple, more than a dozen small forces patriarchs and sect leaders were waiting anxiously. It was they who collectively came to the Floating Cloud Temple and instigated Taoist priest Floating Cloud to make a move. Otherwise, with Taoist priest Floating Cloud's character, he would only make a move if Chu Xiao came knocking on his door. Someone said, "Everyone, do you think Taoist priest Floating Cloud can stop Chu Xiao?" After all, even Ye Renlong died at his hands back in the days of the Demon-Killing Alliance, and now that Chu Xiao is already an expert at the Martial Dao Grandmaster realm, I feel that things don't bode well for Taoist Floating Cloud. Everyone present glanced at him and snorted disdainfully. Previously, they decided to instigate Taoist priest Floating Cloud to make a move. It was everyone's decision. Now, you came to pretend to be a good person and worry about Taoist priest Floating Cloud's safety. What are you pretending for? In fact, everyone had some uncertainty in their hearts, but they didn't expect Taoist priest Floating Cloud to win against Chu Xiao. As long as Taoist priest Floating Cloud could make Chu Xiao stop temporarily, that would be enough. At this moment, the door of the Taoist temple was pushed open, and a pale Taoist priest Floating Cloud staggered in. Everyone could see that Taoist priest Floating Cloud's aura was weak. Everyone present quickly said, "Taoist priest, what happened to you? Did something go wrong?" Taoist priest Floating Cloud weakly waved his hand and said, "Everyone, Chu Xiao's demonic power is strong. I have lived for 100 years in vain, but I am still not his opponent. Fang Datong's only son, Fang Yun, and the giant spirit gang's elder, Chen Hu, have committed suicide. Everyone, I, as an old Taoist priest, can't interfere in this matter. If I interfere, I am afraid that I will lose my life." Everyone present looked at each other. After hearing this, what else could they say? Force Taoist priest Floating Cloud to make a move? Everyone left helplessly. After leaving, everyone looked at each other a few times. Someone said, "Everyone, what should we do now? Do we really have to surrender to the martial suppression hall?" The small forces present were not very strong, but at the same time, they were also overlords in their local area, similar to the Shen family village. Normally, as long as they did not take the initiative to provoke them, those large sects would not attack them. Now, of course, they couldn't stand having a force riding on their heads and ordering them around, so they still wanted to struggle. Someone gritted his teeth and said, "Let's go to the Temple of Great Light. I don't believe that the monks of the Great Light Temple will let Chu Xiao continue to be arrogant in the northern Yen martial world." Actually, the forces present were not too willing to deal with the Great Guangming Temple. The reason was simple. Those monks were too prejudiced. The forces present were not considered orthodox sections. Although they had not done too many evil things, who would dare to say that they were completely innocent? Therefore, as long as they did anything that was not in line with the values of the disciples of the Great Light Temple, the other party would definitely come out to meddle in their business. Moreover, with the strength of those monks, even if they wanted to meddle in other people's business, the people present could do nothing but endure it. However, compared to the suppression martial hall, the group of monks from the Great Light Temple was considered very cute. Therefore, after some discussion, they headed straight for the Temple of Great Light. The Temple of Great Light was far away in the wild land of the far north, so it was not that convenient to go there once. Fortunately, the masters and sect leaders who went to the Temple of Great Light were not weak. Almost all of them had the strength of the unity of heaven and man realm or the five Chi's origin realm. Under the condition that they did not care about their vital Chi and rushed at full speed, it took them half a month to reach the Temple of Great Light. In front of the mountain gate of the Temple of Great Light, everyone was received by a disciple who was in charge of welcoming guests. When everyone present explained everything and wanted to see the abbot, the disciple said helplessly, "Benefactors, the abbot is in seclusion. No one can disturb him." Then we want to see Master Su Yun, the head of the Raging Thought Zen Hall. These people had also heard that in the Temple of Great Light, when the abbot was not around, the head of the Raging Thought Zen Hall, Su Yun, had the most power. The disciple shook his head and said, "I'm afraid you haven't paid attention to some news in the martial world recently, right? Master Su Yun is currently in West Chu. A few days ago, he fought with the head of the 9 great god magi of moon-worshipping cult, Eastern Emperor Tai. He is not in the temple now." Everyone present immediately looked at each other. Someone asked unwillingly, "Then what about the Kongji Zen Hall's Master Su Du and the Karma Zen Hall's Master Su Jing?" The disciple said, "The rise of moon-worshipping cult is a big deal, so Master Su Jing has already gone to West Chu with Master Su Yun. At the same time, there are also the Vajra School's Master Su Yen, the Arhut School's Master Su Hong, and a few other martial uncles." At this point the disciple said in a strange tone, "As for Master Su Du, he is in the temple, but because of some matters, he was punished by Master Su Yun to be in confinement. Are you sure you want Master Su Du to help you?" Everyone present was stunned, but then they suddenly remembered that there seemed to be some rumors in the martial world that the Great Light Temple's Kongji Zen Hall's Master Su Du seems to be a little unreliable. Everyone present looked at each other, not knowing what to do. Originally, they thought that the Great Light Temple would definitely be able to subdue Chu Xiu, but now they realized that in the entire Great Light Temple, the truly reliable masters were either not around or in confinement, leaving only the unreliable ones. At this point, they finally understood why Chu Xiu was so arrogant in his actions. It turned out that he had already calculated that the Great Light Temple, which truly had the power to deal with him in the Northern Yen martial world, no longer had their eyes on him. Even though Chu Xiu had gone overboard in the Northern Yen land, in the eyes of the Great Light Temple, they were still no match for the moon-worshipping cult's threat. Chu Xiu was a demon, but he was at best a little demon now. If the moon-worshipping cult were to be left alone, they would probably develop into a second Kunlun devil cult. Just as the people from the forces were about to leave dejectedly, someone suddenly pushed open the door and said in a deep voice, "The Great Light Temple is not without people. If they're not around, I'm still around." Chu Xiu is wreaking havoc in the Northern Yen martial world. Other people don't care, but how can the Great Light Temple not care? The person who pushed open the door and entered was the Dharma Institute's first seat, Su Xing. He also had quite a bit of a grudge against Chu Xiu. The disciple looked at Su Xing and said hesitantly, "Uncle Su Xing," but Uncle Su Yun previously instructed. Before the disciple could finish speaking, he was interrupted by Su Xing. "Senior brother Su Yun is now in West Chu, and things are constantly changing. How can we do everything according to senior brother Su Yun's instructions? All right, you don't have to worry about this. I'll take responsibility." Hearing Su Xing say this, the disciple could only retreat helplessly. Currently, the abbot was in confinement, and 2 of the 3 great meditation hall's first seats were in West Chu. Only Su Du was in the temple. However, it seemed like Su Du was even more unreliable. Within the Great Light Temple, there was really no one who could order Su Xing around. The people present looked at Su Xing expectantly. They did not know what had happened in the Great Light Temple in the past. They only knew that Su Xing was the Dharma Institute's first seat and a veteran martial arts master. Now that the Great Light Temple's first seat was standing up for them, how could they not suppress Chu Xiu? Looking at the people present, Su Xing said in a deep voice, "Tell me everything." The people present immediately nodded and told him about the giant spirit gang, as well as how Chu Xiu had used despicable means to force the Northern Yen martial world forces to join the suppression martial hall. Of course, from their mouths, the things that Chu Xiu had done were 10 times worse. They described him as an unforgivable devil. After listening to them, Su Xing said coldly, "Arrogant. Arrogant. He's simply lawless. Bring people to the giant spirit gang immediately." Within the Great Light Temple, although Su Xing could not order others around, he was still the Dharma Institute's first seat, after all. The disciples of the Dharma Institute would still listen to his orders. At the same time, within the giant spirit gang, Chu Xiu was going through the intelligence reports that Shen Feiying and the others had handed over. These intelligence reports were about the forces that had been forced to join the suppression martial hall. Previously, Chu Xiu had used some means to force these people to join the suppression martial hall. However, it was obvious that this group of people were not convinced. As long as they were given a chance, they would immediately rebel. As for the agreement that Chu Xiu had forced them to sign, it was no different from a piece of scrap paper. Therefore, Chu Xiu had to think of a safe way to make them submit, even if he had to force them to submit. At that moment, Shen Feiying ran in anxiously and said, "Sir, this is bad. The Great Light Temple's Dharma Institute's first seat, Su Xing, has brought a large number of Great Light Temple's disciples here." Shen Feiying was really panicking at that moment. If one was not a Northern Yen person, one would not know the weight of the Great Light Temple. In the Northern Yen land, the Great Light Temple was the #1 sect in name and in reality. They had accumulated power for a long time. At that moment, when Shen Feiying heard that the Great Light Temple had actually come to their door, even if he knew that Chu Xiu was there to support them, he still felt like the sky was falling. Especially when the other party was a first seat of an academy. It should be known that when Feng Datong was around, he had to be polite to the first seat of an academy from the Great Light Temple. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "It's just the Great Light Temple. Why are you panicking? Moreover, Su Xing is an old acquaintance of mine. In the past, I continuously rose on the Longhu leaderboard because of this Master Su Xing. This person is my lucky star." As he said this, Chu Xiu walked straight out the door. Behind him, Shen Feiying still had a look of panic on his face. The prestige he had accumulated over a long period of time against the Great Light Temple would not fade so easily. Outside the giant spirit gang, there were hundreds of disciples of the Dharma House behind Su Xing. The weakest of these people had reached the physical invulnerability realm, and there were more than 10 of them who had reached the unity of heaven and man realm. Moreover, these disciples were not the entire Dharma House's disciples. They were just a small part of it. This was the foundation of a large sect. The true foundation of a large sect did not lie in a martial arts master like Su Xing or a first seat like him, but in these ordinary disciples. As long as these disciples were still around, they could grow into countless Su Xing in the future. The legacy of the Great Light Temple would never end. At that moment, Su Xing looked at Chu Xiu, who walked out of the giant spirit gang. His eyes flashed with majestic anger. Su Yun said that his anger was too strong. If he could not get rid of it, it would affect his cultivation. But for Su Xing, as long as he killed Chu Xiu, his obsession would naturally disappear. Why would he need to suppress his anger? Killing Chu Xiu was cultivation. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.